He was an intellectual who advocated action. He was a rebel who fought for tradition. He was an artist who shocked the world. Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas present a new film by Paul Schrader. Mishima. His writing shook the soul. His flamboyance captivated a generation. His vision challenged the conscience of his time. And on November 25th, 1970, his life became the ultimate expression of his art. Mishima.
Goddamn right.
Mishima. Very, very 80s, I think, like action movie trailer to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is amazing considering the lack of parkour in this movie.
He parkours up the barrack walls. You know what I mean? At the end of it, he's like,
there wasn't
did you see that part?
There was an alarming lack of parkour in Mishima. Yes, you're
right. All right, welcome to Movie Night Extravaganza, episode 67, Mishima. I am here joined by J. Andrew, Ukraine World. He's in solidarity this week. Illustrator, artist. He's usually the whole world, but today he's just focused on solidarity with Ukraine. How's it going?
Konnichiwa.
Ukraine or Japan?
No. I'm all ripped up for Japan. I've been practicing saying, Forrest son, Conan son, Erica. So I'm like on the ball here,
You should change your name to J. Andrew Weeb. I think that would be a way funnier name for you right now. Also joined by Protonic Reversal and Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends frontman Conan Neutron. How's it going? You're the one that suggested this movie. I should have made you lead the episode, I guess. But
yeah, that's fine. I'm stoked to be talking about this. This was a somewhat recent-ish discovery off of the Criterion Challenge, and it blew me away. Like, it blew me away so much I was like, wow, I wish anyone else I knew about this movie so I could talk about with them. And here we are, a true success story. I can't. It's so hard to describe that, and I think if you try to describe it to people, you're like, that sounds terrible, and it's actually badass, and that's what makes it so great. Not the least of which is, as heard in that trailer, the incredible Philip Glass score, which I'm sure we'll get into.
It's it's a biopic, right? And as soon as you say something is a biopic, people automatically are like, dude, another one. And then you go, this is a biopic of a Japanese writer, and three of his novels. Japanese, the most famous Japanese writer of the post-war period, and three of his novels are used as the central crux of the movie. And so that does not
sound pretentious.
Yeah, that does not do justice.
And it's written by Americans.
Yeah. And also the guy's arguably a fascist, so you got to throw that part into it too.
Yeah, you're really selling it. Yeah.
Also joined by Erica Strout, a Georgia-based filmmaker, music video director, and musician. She is half the musical duo Dream Tent, plays guitar and sings Motherfucker, and the live band of Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. I think you have the longest bio of any regular guest that we've written for this.
Yeah, let's pare that down next time.
but it's his own
you have to work so hard. You say what?
It's his one chance to say motherfucker. He's got to say it.
I don't want to take that away.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't take that away from him, would you? You wouldn't download a car. Yeah. Remember those ads?
Yeah, those ads were out of control.
Yeah, and it was all intercapped to the Paper Chase or Limp Bizkit or something. Yeah. Anyway.
So I want to start with talking about the production design of this movie. Incredible, right? Incredible production design, and you can see part of it like even behind us in the background. I use the golden sun as they're standing up, and they're all getting ready to overthrow capitalism for the emperor. Which, guys, what the fuck? What the fuck? Why are you overthrowing capitalism in order to reinstall the emperor? That sucks.
You're so close. You're so close.
Yeah, you're so close to getting it. Yeah, exactly.
That scene really depressed me when he stands in front of the, they've taken Tokyo University and he's standing in front of them and he's like, what we want is not so different after all. And it's like, no, it is. You literally just want the same thing, but with the emperor back. They want socialism of some kind. I mean, various kinds, but still, like.
Yeah, and it's sort of like the moment of like, well, we want the reinstatement of the emperor. And they're like, boo, boo. And it's like, wow, tough crowd, let me tell you. But it's like, yeah, like that's pretty different, bro. Like, why did you think they were gonna leap to your side just because like you have some books that maybe some people like in there, you know?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of fascinating too because he seems to treat it as capitalism on the right. And then, liberals and socialism on the left. So he says, I'm standing up against both the left and the right. But like, no, you're a fascist. Like that is your politics.
He's Jimmy Dore.
Yeah. He's like, I'm here as a kind of just the centrist guy. Centrism being reinstating the emperor. And it's like, no, that's not
the thing we all want. Boo, boo. That's a great scene though, because at the time, like, unless you know his story and like know like his background as a person, you don't necessarily know that like that's like what he's like. It doesn't fit the framework of the scene that's what he says. Like it seems like it's like, oh, this is gonna be the moment where everybody comes together and hey, you're right, we all do want the same thing, blah, blah. And it's like, oh nope, that was the wrong thing to say right there. Like even if that's the thing you actually want, like, and people today, like, proto-fascists, pseudo-fascists, whatever, today would never obliquely say it. They would like use weasel language, they would use coded language, whatever. But like the fact that he says it and then they like boo harder, and it's like, wow, what a great scene. Like,
well, I mean, it's essentially, I don't think he sees it that way, but so they were very much thinking about it in terms of post-war Japan, right? Like Japan kind of being kicked into gear as a capitalist society. When before that, it had been, I mean, it was an empire, but it was like a feudal empire in the sense that they kept that hierarchy in place. And he didn't even want that hierarchy, like the war order, where it kind of was capitalism starting to grow around that. He wanted that. He wanted like the feudal samurai order to return. And he thought that the only way to bring Japanese society back is not just nationalism in terms of like the way that we think about it, where it's like, like we're patriotic. It's like, no, there's like going to be knights on the street, like saving damsels and shit.
Right, exactly.
While the rest of the world delves deeper into like a neoliberal order, as it was kind of going towards at that time, like Japan would have knights riding through the fucking thing, committing fucking seppuku when they couldn't like rescue like the damsel in distress. Like it would be a fucking mess. And that guy's like, we all want the same thing. You guys want socialism.
That's what we all want, right? I mean, the only thing remotely close to that I can think of is like the sort of the fascination with cowboy culture amongst the right. Of like, no, you want it literally to be like, people doing shootouts in the streets and stuff like that. Yeah. And that's the only corollary. That I really
historic stuff, but like the John Wayne movie version.
Yeah, but with like the Punisher skull with like the cop colors on it, right? Instead of being historical. But like that's the only, because it's crazy. Nobody wants that. Nobody is looking for that. And this guy, who's clearly a very intelligent person, clearly like no dummy, and had his ethos. But like not a stupid person. It's one of the things that makes him so fascinating. Because it's like, how did you get to that? Why is that the thing? Right. But it does a good job of explaining why, even if you're like, I don't agree with any part of that. But respect.
I mean, it doesn't really get touched on in the movie, but I have these clips of Paul Schrader talking about him as a character, like as a person. And
well, let's. I'm totally dominating this. Like Erica, Andy, if you guys want to jump into that too, just before since I know this is gonna be a long clip, so.
I mean, I'm going to be completely honest with you. This is the one part of Japanese history I haven't really studied that much in depth. You want to go into the Edo period, like I'm your man. but
Andy's trying to bring back the samurai. And Andy actually did agree with Mishima the
Heck
entire
yeah!
movie.
Actually,
I really like Kurosawa movies. Let's bring back
yeah.
the samurai.
Would roaming Ronins, say that 5 times fast, be such a bad thing?
No, I think we're like Frank Miller. This is the kind of stuff I'm into.
Which, by the way, we should say our This is Revolution episode that we're doing on Wednesday is going to be a Kurosawa movie. So this is 2 different, very, very different moments, I guess, or thought process, I think, in Japanese history that we're doing in a row. But
Nice.
but yeah, Erica, you have any thoughts
Erica,
on all
hit
this?
it.
Yeah.
I just I know we're gonna cover in more depth as we go on, but I guess my initial thought is that my mind is sort of blown. Like I knew nothing about this guy before we watched this movie, before I was invited on here, and which, by the way, I'm happy to be here with you guys again. But I was
Took
like
11 minutes to say it.
oh, not a moment too soon. But so I started watching it, and then I had to pause it for a while, but in between, before I got back to it, I started looking it up and reading up about this guy, and I had a hard time like kind of discerning between like what actually happened in his life and what was part of his art, and like so
It blurs the lines, right?
yeah, it does, yeah.
Much like the famous song "Blurred Lines."
Don't
I was
bring
gonna,
that up
I was
right
gonna
now.
say interestingly. I was gonna say interestingly, a figure that makes his life that much a part of his art is fucking Kanye. Like, but far less.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I can see it.
Yeah.
South,
What's
but,
Now,
like
Robin Thicke? Come on, man. Stick with the bet.
Oh yeah, Blurred Lines is Robin Thicke. That's true.
yeah,
but
but no, but
just
I was
like-
thinking in my head, like when
Like
Erica
a
said,
modern
like,
parallel to.
it's hard to
what
tell
Mishima
how much
today
of
would
it is
be.
art and how much of it is
Yeah.
art and how much of it is his actual life. And I was thinking like, oh fuck, kind of like Kanye in some fucking weird way.
But that's kind of
Yeah.
the point. That's what Schrader kind of does with the movie, right? Like, and that's kind of what makes it cool. Is because it does blend those things together. Like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is one of his stories, but then also like,
Yeah.
is this actually happened?
Yeah, like I had to look up the plots of the different books that he had incorporated into the movie to like kind of wrap my brain around it. But just my mind is blown at the level of just blind like it's beyond confidence. It's like this guy was so self-important and like, yeah, he was smart, yeah, he was super artistic, obviously very prolific. Like, not that he doesn't deserve credit for the art that he created, like all those books and everything. Like, he clearly had a lot of talent, but like unreal levels of like self-importance within this, where he created his own army. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Like,
NBD, my personal army.
yeah, like, and I know they didn't like carry weapons or whatever, but still, it was like, I mean, I'm hesitating to use a certain word about it, but just I'm still wrapping my brain around it. Is all. That's all.
Well,
That's my opening thought.
I mean,
It is
a part
definitely
of
a
that
lot,
is also the mixture between, I think, and this gets into what Paul Schrader ends up saying about it, but like there's kind of a mixture between hierarchy, which I think the Japanese system in general getting kind of thrown into this gear straight from being like an empire that had like literally still like a son emperor that was, you know what I mean, like one of the few places left that kind of had that kind of feudal system left, and that hierarchy and the deep humiliation that Japanese people felt after getting crushed in World War II kind of fused together in this moment to kind of allow somebody like Mishima to like that was well respected. Nobody really wanted to say, hey, maybe don't do that, because that's like the most prolific writer they have at this period. You know what I mean? Like they don't want further humiliation by being like, no, the one writer we have is kind of a nut job, and maybe we should like not let that guy have an army. Like they're kind of a lot more deferential, I think, to that figure than like in the West they would have been maybe like
it's
somebody
a
like
bit
that.
of Confucianism, which did have a small importance. Excuse me, smaller importance in Japan than it did, say, in China, where it originated, because this is the focus of Confucianism is like your place in society, your place in family, and like your place in the hierarchy, basically. and there's a lot of hierarchical stuff with that, which is why like governments tend to kind of focus on that, and you see that kind of reflected like in other philosophies that came up around the same time, because Taoism seems to like coexist with a lot of other beliefs too. So you kind of see that in the what's the phrase? The word I'm looking for, like the fluidness of the beliefs, and like how they can kind of transfer as society around it changes, because a neoliberal capitalist society is very different than, say, a feudal society. Not really, but but yeah,
that kind of feudal society. Like
but there's a certain kind of translation of that kind of hierarchy in both of those, where that type of belief would kind of come in handy.
And there was a very popular trend, and talking to Paul Schrader about it, Dick Cavett kind of references this. There's a huge trend about like, Japanese capitalism is a little bit different. People need to be treated differently within that system. So there's all these books like How to Do Business with the Japanese that kind of circulated around this time. And like, I remember watching Mad Men. They have the thing where they pitch to I can't remember if I think it's Honda, right? Like they pitched the motorcycle design or something. And Burt Cooper's reading the How to Do Business with the Japanese book, and like, the Sword and the Chrysanthemum or whatever, like all those books that are like, this is how we translate this style of kind of more, I think, formalized capitalism, like within that social order, to like a Western audience who now we all have to do business together, or we all are going to do business together because this is like a globalized order. And, this society that was feudal has realized that the only way to kind of compete in the marketplace, I guess, is to grind itself up to like, 10th gear. And I think, even when you look at like lifespans and stuff, like the Japanese have very high lifespans, like, I don't think they really had to kick that up the same way that like in Russia or something, where lifespans dropped dramatically in the 90s when they tried to do that like really fast transition. Even like China, that really fast transition to capitalism, that didn't really happen in Japan. But like at the same time, it is a complete shift in the way that these economic processes, I think, are treated. But this is the clip I wanted to play about production design, and this is the woman that did the production design for this, talking about how this is the first movie that she ever actually was hired as a production designer on.
Real quickly, just a second. This was also a year before Gung Ho, which came out 1986, which kind of touches a lot on that whole Japanese versus American way of doing business.
Which is basically how it was characterized to a lot of folks in the States too. It was like that was the whole like, America by American, which is like, American, it's a Marianas Islands, made by child labor, but it's still American, counts, it's a territory.
And that was Trump. I mean, when Trump first started doing media appearances on Oprah and all those places where he kind of delved his foot into politics, it was like, the Japanese, they're really killing us. They're killing us. We need to get back to an American economy again. And
Mm.
マスコミに現れる三島由紀夫っていうのがすごく人間として嫌でしたね。嫌悪感がすごくあった。常にもう俺のなんか塊みたいな人で品がない人だなというふうに思ったし、そしてニューヨークに初めて来てどういう仕事なのかポールと話し合った時にポールさん実はね、私三島由紀夫は嫌いなんですっていうふうにお話したんですよね。だから私はあなたの仕事に適任ではないと思う。そうしたらポールが最高だ、これはもうベストですとおっしゃったわけ。もう英子さんがね、三島由紀夫を嫌いであるということは非常に適しています。なぜかと言いますとね、この映画は僕の三島を描きたいのであって、英子さんの三島を描くのではありません。一番最初にですね、トム・ラディが私の名前をポール・シュレーダーに、推薦してくれたようなんですよ。その時ちょうどですね、ニューヨークのパブリッシャーから私の一冊目の作品集で英子バイ英子という本が出たばっかりで、ポールは私のことは全く知らなかったんだけれども、その英子バイ英子を買ってで研究して まあ、技術的にですね、私にはやっぱりプロの技術が備わってなかったわけだから、普通、よほど勇気がなければね、アマチュアに近い栄光を起用するっていうことは、普通はやらないと思うんですよね。でも、そういう意味で、ポールっていうのはすごい、まあ、ブレイブな人であると思うし、もう、自分が、表現を考えるときに、まあ、3つの、なんていうか、考え方にこだわるわけです。で、まあ、そのこだわりは、時によって意味がなく思う方も多いかもしれないんだけれどもね、私のまあ性格的なものかもしれないけれども、やはりオリジナリティはなければいけない。それからタイムレスでなければいけない。で、まあ、レボリューショナリーというものがなければいけない。で、これの3つがまあ自分のキーワードでですね、自分が表現を考えるときに、必ずその3つが備わっているかどうかっていうことを考えながら作ってきたわけですね。で、私が、まあ、ポールに、まあ、直感的にこれは違うというふうに思ったので、これではなくですね、例えば、その小説の部分を完全に、シアターのようなセットにする。そして、劇中劇のような作り方にする。そういう考え方はどうですかと。で、シュレーダーに提案したわけですね。結局、私がその小説の部分を相当大胆なアイデアでやろうと提案し、しかもポールとジョンがそれで OK、コングラチュレーションって言われた時点から、小説の部分のプロダクションデザインの、まあ、セットデザインのウェイトがものすごく大きくなってきたわけですね。まあ大変な仕事になってきたわけです。新しいビジュアルコンセプトを出すということに関してはもちろん自信があったけれども、それをどうやってリアライズしたらいいか、どうやって映画という世界にそれを持ち込んだらいいかっていう具体的な方法も分かってなかったわけです。で、それをそのシュレーダーにまあ話したら、それはもう全く問題ないと。つまりそういう映画の世界のプロフェッショナルなアソシエイトデザイナーっていうのは僕が探してあげるから、その人があなたの新しいコンセプトをリアライズすればいいのだから、あなたはもう自由に発想すればいいというふうに言ってくれたんですよね。それまでに竹中和夫さんという日本のベテランの、まあ、アソシエイトデザイナーを私につけてくださって、竹中さんと話し合ってどういうふうにやっていこうかということになったんですが、竹中さんからの提案でね、じゃあ石岡さんはもうその小説の部分のユニークなセット作りにもう専念してみたらどうですかと。で、僕は1と2の部分を徹底的にやって、それをあなたにチェックしてもらって、一緒にまあ考え方を結論を出してそっちを進めますから、竹中さんが最初のその三島が最後に自害する一日という設定、それはもうほとんどロケーションでやりました。それから2番目の、幼年時代から、成長するまでの彼のバイオグラフィー的なブラック&ホワイトの世界、これも竹中さんはほとんどリサーチをやってもらって、彼に中心になってやってもらおうと考えたわけです。
Nice. I mean,
Wow.
better than nice, badass. I mean,
Yeah.
what a Jesus.
Yeah, I was very different. I was
Yeah.
expecting like the person to come on and being something like a Quentin Tarantino type personality, being like, "Yeah, you see, I saw Tokyo Drifter, and I said that's the movie I want it to look like." So I
said,
made,
Give me that VHS tape right now.
yeah. And
But
I
all
mean, if
of-
you have seen Tokyo Drifter, I'm sorry, Erica.
Oh no, I didn't mean to talk over you.
But if you have seen Tokyo Drifter, there's a static similarity between the two films.
Good job working. Good job working that in. I knew you were.
Congratulations. 24
Hey, I
minutes.
warned
Mark
you
it
guys.
down.
But can
that
he
this
work in
was coming up.
Stargate somehow?
We shall see. We shall see. But no, Tokyo Drifter is a gorgeous, weird action movie that influenced comic books in the 70s and 80s, but also was a musical. and I cannot even begin to explain. Like this movie on paper shouldn't work, but it's actually really kind of just a fascinating watch, and it is so visually impressive.
Much like Mishima, Life in Four
Yes.
Parts, which we're discussing tonight.
I just realized how hard it's going to be for anybody, by the way, who's listening to this as an audio version rather than a video thing to make
Talk
it through
about
that.
the visuals.
Yeah, Forrest is gonna like badly read the subtitles for the audio version.
Oh, like when you have to turn on for like if you're sightless, right? And it describes what you're seeing. The woman goes to the sink and pours a glass of water. Like, have you guys ever checked that out?
Yeah. No, I've
No, I have a closed captioning on a lot because I am half deaf, but
yeah. This is the other.
Not quite the same.
This is the other way. Just Erica, you were gonna say
like
something.
if you can't see something. Yeah, I was gonna say that. Good on Paul Schrader for taking a chance on her being inexperienced in production design, although clearly a very talented artist already. But like and I remember while I was watching it, like those scenes, the book scenes, I was like, this feels like a set on a stage. Like they very much feel like all of her ideas, like very well translated, visually speaking. Like she absolutely nailed it.
And it ends up being like a actually really fascinating choice because like of her as the production designer, because they end up relying on her a lot for the research when they're writing the script, because obviously it's like, you know, white guys from America like writing the script for this movie. So like a lot of the
so on that, if I may force real quick, I was thinking about it right before. Oh, sorry, right before we're talking about the production design, probably the closest analog would be Hemingway, and even then it's not totally accurate because like imagine Hemingway but with, like Stephen King's reach. Like is probably the best way to put it. Like Hemingway vibes, but like Stephen King reach. Go ahead.
For Mishima's work, you mean?
Like its cultural cachet in Japan. It was like that level. Everybody, Mishima, of course. You know, as opposed to like
it's also I think and they touch on this within the movie itself, briefly. But you know, over time, right? He becomes more famous in Japan. He gets an international reach, and I think that if he was just a Japanese writer. And he was only writing for Japanese audiences, which was most writers at that time, right? Like, I think it's been translated. A lot of other stuff has been translated since then. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, we kind of have a very, we have a Japanese obsession in this generation, but at this time they didn't, right? Like, it was in the post-war period. So his work gets translated to an international audience. He's one of the few Japanese writers that does. So it's not just that they're celebrating someone who's celebrated on their stage. The French are celebrating him. The American reading audiences are celebrating him. So it's this figure that kind of transcends nations, that they're kind of dealing with being this very bipolar, schizophrenic character at the same time, and not wanting everybody else in the internationally. I mean, I don't know how much about that they knew, but like, Paul Schrader talks about it with like after doing the research in this, like he kind of probably had some form of schizophrenia. And the fact that, you know, he was like this internationally renowned author when there wasn't really any other ones in Japan kind of made it so that any embarrassment that they felt through him was like a national shame.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't think we've ever had that because we kind of have a lot of openly schizophrenic and bipolar writers.
But we have no national shame whatsoever.
Yeah.
We have the most shame.
I mean, we should.
I can't think of a time for America though when we would have had one person who could have been that kind of representative to the whole world for us. Like we've kind of been pretty dominant.
You really have to go back to like before the Civil War to see that, because like if you I happened to live for a while near where Herman Melville used to live. The cliffs on the mountain next, you know, where my sister finished up high school was
as they're known, as everybody
the cliffs on the mountain
were inspiration
the cliffs in the mountain
for Moby Dick. So which is weird. You to think about that, but anyways, that, you know, like Herman Melville was kind of that first great writer that came out of America, because at that point in time we were considered like culturally inferior to Europe, and we were heavily judged. And so if you look at like press of the Civil War too, like they're just like, oh, these children are just fighting amongst themselves. You know, this is terrible, and like their takes were just awful. You know,
I hadn't thought about it that way.
See that because we, you know, our education system is so America centered. You know, we're not going to actually see, you know, get into
Kitty. Maybe
yeah,
that's
I
why I
know.
have that perception too, is because, yeah.
Yeah, but you do have to, you know, it did exist. It's just like
Wanna come down
nobody
there?
was alive. You know, not
Yeah.
anybody we know's lifetime really.
Yeah.
How does
We weren't
how
laughing
does,
at
how
you,
does-
Andy.
How does the
No,
cat
I
feel
saw the
about?
cat.
The
How does the
kitty.
cat feel about Mishima?
Vicky, please vent your thoughts about this
Vicky.
Criterion Collection movie.
Well, he has so much to say. Can you tell him to shut up?
I know. Yeah, he's the perfect guest. He's the perfect guest who never says anything. He just comes in and looks good. That's what I used to do.
No, but
Aw.
I think also there's a switch that happens, right? And I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of like Russia and Ukraine and everything going on throughout the world right now. Like
Something going on in Ukraine? I hadn't heard.
no, but like the concept of building a national identity, right? That happens over a certain amount of time. When things switch completely for a country, it kind of is up for grabs who gets to build that national identity again.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to kind of have a nationalistic fervor happen is this sense that like, oh, the best times are behind us. We need to get back to this very Ronin centered, like samurai society, or we need to get back to, like there's a million different possibilities. I mean, I was watching Adam Curtis, the Can't Get You Out of My Head.
No.
So I was watching that recently, and they talk about how kind of both both the KKK and like society in Britain, as both societies kind of went into turmoil after the war, the cohesive national identity, like those, like that kind of almost like feudal society got reborn as a thought point for people. So like thinking about this guy specifically, and in Japanese society kind of going into this incredibly high gear on the world stage, now being a kind of a capitalist economy, he always downplayed the political implications of all of his work. Like he would go, and he knew to do that. Like he would go in front of cameras and they'd say, oh, like, because they knew like there's something political about this. Like, can you explain that? And he'd be like, oh no, it's not political. There's nothing political about it. And like, so it's kind of a fast.
I just want to return to traditional values. That's it.
Make Japan great again.
So that's what I want to say. I
they
didn't want
invited
to
the CPAC and everything, like.
Yeah.
I feel like it's important to be wary of anyone who wants to go back to a past time.
Yeah, well, but also there's kind of a national feeling, right? Like, sorry, I'll let you say something after this. Like, there's a national feeling that things are going wrong, and if you have centuries of history built around these hierarchical concepts, and then all of a sudden the hierarchy completely changes, the whole society kind of feels like there's something going wrong. And when someone could say, well, what's going wrong is these changes are happening too fast. All of a sudden people are
uncomfortable.
Like, yeah, sure. Like maybe that's why I'm uncomfortable. So it resonates with people. And then, people end up doing things like joining the guy's private militia and listening to whatever he says that week.
In retrospect, not the best idea.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that
or voting for Trump.
There's some corollaries like with Mother Custer's in that way. Like think of like a post World War II Germany in that same way, and rebuilding its identity and having to take a stock morally of where it was. Now it's different with Japan, because Japan is more like, to colloquially, I believe the expression is, have your dick kicked in the dirt. And I think that had a lot to do with the rise of like this Mishima, like getting back to machismo and getting more to like, oh, we're dudes who like, work out, and
we're guys
like,
being dudes over here.
We're a bunch of dudes that are in here with another bunch of sweaty dudes all working out at the same time. And like, there's nothing like remotely homoerotic about any piece of this. And like, whatever, no harm, no foul to the gym. Don't get me wrong. But I think that's key towards being like, well, who are we? Who are we to be laid low in this way, and what is the path back? And he was a prominent voice, whether you agreed with his suppositions or what his stories were imparting. Sure, accidentally or on purpose. Yeah, accidentally. It was an important part of figuring out identity as a nation, including being like, yeah, we're not that. That's not it.
Yeah,
which is almost just as important for some folks, and that like led to, I mean, like whatever, it's like a history
and watching that clip perfectly kind of imparts that, right? Like national identity is not a one thing, and to see somebody who was working presumably first in Japan, but then working in the United States, because she went on to have like an illustrious and still is alive. So I'm not saying she went on in past tense, but like she went on to do like Coppola movies. They all kind of, she was part of that whole American.
You're talking about the set designer now. You're talking about
yeah.
Okay, yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, we mentioned in the chat. Nobody could hear it, but like that Apocalypse Now poster for those that are like maybe listening to the audio version, badass.
Yeah. And
clearly
it kind of gets into something that we talked about. At least 3 out of 4 of us talked about on when we did the conversation, right? With where we talked about Coppola kind of creating American zoetrope and like this kind of this incredibly like the Hollywood system breaking down, and they kind of kept their, I think, group very close to the vest. It was always people they had worked with before, people whose work that they already knew, that they respected. Not anyone from the unions.
Yeah, that's it.
Like,
That was way more key than I expected before. I was like, really? I didn't realize there was that much. Sort of like, oh yeah, fuck the unions. Oh.
No, so having her kind of brought in, right? She ends up doing a lot of these movies as the production designer, because once she's done this movie, they're like, oh no, we know that this is someone who can handle this. This is another fucking creative powerhouse. So it's interesting on that level, but also to have her say like, no, I didn't like Mishima. Like that was somebody that I found distasteful. And it's the same way that like, a lot of younger people in America, or a lot of, I mean, pretty much all women that aren't like suburban white women are like, no, I found Trump distasteful. You can look at it like that same way. Like that person went on TV. They were constantly talking about like this old way of life. I found that crass. I didn't like that person. So in the same way,
with the distinction that Trump never actually creates anything.
He creates his name on all kinds of buildings.
He creates press is what he does. Yeah, but like, whereas again, I'm just going to draw the corollary because I want to be very clear that Mishima actually has many creative works, whether one agrees with the contents or not. Whereas Trump's, even his freaking autobiography is ghostwritten. But anyway, yeah, that's probably a needless point for this audience, but you never know who's watching. So
also, I would say always be wary of like, people that have done one form of art for a long time and suddenly become like multimedia, putting themselves in the middle of the spectacle kind of artists. Like Mishima suddenly like gets involved in bodybuilding. No, but like gets involved in bodybuilding, and then all of a sudden he's like, well, now I'm a photographer. Look at this picture of my muscles. And then he makes a bunch of films with him at the center of it, being a samurai. And one of them he commits seppuku. Like, I don't know. I'd be wary of that kind of bringing it back to like the Kanye corollary, where all of a sudden,
doing all these kind of illustrations, and now all of a sudden doing podcasting.
No, see, that's just a little bit of a different thing. I'm talking about like
no,
art.
It's exactly
like, I would
the
always
same.
watch out for what artists. I would always watch out for what artists that put themselves in the center of their art that much really are talking about. Like, it doesn't in fact matter.
So the more
schizophrenia makes perfect sense.
The real common one is comedians being musicians and musicians being comedians, or attempting to do so, I might add. Which is to say that as much as I look, credit where credit's due. I'm quick. I'm like fairly clever, but like I'm not a comedian. Like, and I'm the first person to say that because that is a craft.
That's
in the same way that
jump, he did like 17.
Yeah, well, he was again, and like let's be clear. When he got like really bodybuilding, it's like, hey everybody, let's go back to my house and I'll take pictures of everybody like flexed out. And it's like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, really not homoerotic at all, bro. But okay.
He was bisexual or homosexual? Because he had a wife and kids, right?
I honestly, like, I really don't know. I'm not sure if it matters. Like, I'm not sure if it matters.
Well,
Definitely.
Paul Schrader seemed to think homosexual. That was when he talks to Dick Cavett. They kind of talk about that part of it, but I don't know. It's kind of
his ego seems more important than any other human being, frankly. But like he's like I would say there's a certain amount of fluidity, sexual fluidity, which is kind of makes him more interesting, frankly.
Yeah.
Like if he was just like a bro that bro stuff, like they wouldn't be nearly as interesting of a character study, I think.
Well, there's the more complicated. I think the reason I'm curious about it, and the distinction between those two, I guess it doesn't really matter. He was definitely interested in men, at the very least. He may have also been interested in women. But like, I think just like in that culture, and especially at that time too, like being not straight, being not a cisgendered straight man, like I think. I can't help but wonder psychologically how he. I mean, you could see the results of it, I guess, but how he like processed through that, and either
process it through his own self, right? Like he processed it through the thought of like, oh, would this young virile man make a perfect soldier, and would I make a perfect soldier? And it seemed to be very, like the way he processed it seemed very strange. It was both through his own body, like oh, like I'm sleeping with this much younger man, and he seems more virile, and he looks in the mirror, and because he talks about homosexuality in this, like as a concept, like he looks in the mirror, and you know the guy sees beauty. He looked like. But then Mishima looks in the mirror and he sees like, you know, frailty and you know, age, and he's like,
which is the one thing he's a total bigot about is age.
Yeah,
like he's a complete ageist, but it's the one it's like, what does he say? Like if you're over 40, like
you should kill yourself.
Yeah, like which is
also
crazy.
It's also the culture that has the like, as I said, with lifespan, right? Like it's the culture that gets to be the oldest. Like the oldest people are generally Japanese, like or like Tibetan. I mean, before China kind of started starving them out. Like it's like the oldest people come from that part of the world. So it's funny to have someone be like, no, if you're over 40, kill yourself. Like, dude, that's like most of the population right now.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to buy your goddamn books.
What is it that he said? It was like, if you want your beauty to persist, then you have to kill yourself at the height of your beauty.
Yeah.
And he thought that at 40, you've peaked at 40, so that's where you kill yourself. But he
which
waited
is
until
crazy.
45.
Die young, you make a better corpse, I believe was the quote.
Yeah.
Well, but I think he said die young and leave a pretty corpse or whatever. But like his thing against Hemingway was that like that was a thing he dissed on for Hemingway at the time, and then like kind of did like similar-ish thing. You know, granted, like it manifested very differently, which I haven't even got into yet. I'm excited to talk about, but like. Yeah,
footage to show.
Like just worship of youth and virility, as sort of like being like, well, then your essence is diminished. I forget the exact quote, but like he has some aphorism or something. It's very poetic, but
everything he says is poetic, which is what makes you realize.
Even when he's like just flat out like you're nuts, but it's like that's very beautifully said, but you're freaking bonkers.
Yeah. Well, schizophrenia. Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I would wonder if there's some sociopathy in there too.
Yeah. Ooh. Well, I mean, all those things kind of at some point, in some cases
overlap. Yeah.
Yeah. But one thing he says, even the most beautiful body is soon destroyed by age. Where is your beauty then? Only art makes human beauty endure. You must devise an artist scheme to preserve it. You must commit suicide at the height of your beauty. That was
I was like, cool. Whoa, what? I don't know about that.
I think it is I was very inspired by how seriously he took his artistic life. Like while I was reading about him and watching this, I was definitely feeling some inspiration on that. But like also like he takes it like crazy far, but like it was inspiring to like world's oldest man ever. What is he, like 125? I'm sorry.
Thanks for taking Erica off task, Andy.
Just got distracted.
Appreciate that. Passing notes in class when she's speaking.
Yeah, no, he is.
Check it out. It's crazy. They're really old.
Okay, the world's oldest man ever. He lived to be 116 years old.
Look at this weird bird.
I'm gonna live to be older, but whatever.
but anyways, he's actually from Japan. His name is Jiramo Kumbura. And he passed away in 2012.
I thought there was a guy who lived to be like 124.
I thought so too, but I'm looking at Guinness Book of World
Records.
No,
so I think that person's wasn't confirmed. Like they couldn't find a birth certificate for them.
Oh, that makes sense.
But can you?
There's a great real quick.
Let's play a Who Said It game. Wait, I want to play a Who Said It game for a second.
Okay. I'm gonna point of order.
Okay.
I'm never gonna get a chance to say this again and have it be relevant to a point, which is say that when he's in the classroom and the line is, having got this far out of sheer pride, I'm not going to become logical now. I think that's an incredible line.
Yeah.
And that speaks to Erica's point. I just wanted to get that out there. Now
I just kept thinking about like Ben Burgess when he said that when he's addressing the class, and he's like, oh, you guys can't out logic me. I don't have any logic. Like, fuck you. And I'm like, how would you debate? Because he said something like, oh, like the great debater or something at one point, and I was like, damn, you can't debate this guy.
Yeah, but that's actually how I
debate him.
No, yeah.
That's how I handle going on Ben's show. It's like, you know.
Yeah, it's the Kobayashi Maru of debate.
But no, so I was imagining these two quotes as Kanye tweets. where he says,
Fantastic. I'm all in.
A writer is a voyeur par excellence. I came to hate this position. I aim not only to be the seer, but also be seen. That is a Kanye tweet. And then the other one is men wear masks to make themselves beautiful, but unlike a woman, a man's desire to be beautiful is a desire for death. And I could imagine both of those as like 2008 or 2012.
Pretty interchangeable.
Breakdown.
Yeah.
Breakdown tweets.
Mishima would be like an incredible Twitter presence.
Oh, 100.
Oh yeah, that would.
No,
be
He would have a following in the
that-
millions, to be sure.
The thing is, though,
one
that
way or
people
the other.
still feel incredibly ashamed about him. I can't imagine how much more they'd feel like they'd have to take his, they'd have to like imprison him and take his phone away, like put him on house arrest and be like, dude, let me get that phone. You can't. We're trying to build a national project here. You cannot be tweeting. But
So how do Japanese people feel about him?
So this gets into an
Generally,
interesting thing that I wanted to bring into this, because this is from the Dick Cavett and Paul Schrader interview, which I guess most people.
Do you mean Duck Cavett?
Most people involved in the production of this didn't speak English, so Paul Schrader, who hates giving interviews famously, had to go out and like do all of the press for this, which makes it very funny. But this is Paul Schrader explaining how he viewed Mishima, and then why it was so hard for a lot of people to kind of thought about making this into a movie, and it was very hard to,
how do you do it? And like, this is the answer is like, anyway, I'm psyched.
One answer is that you had to stick with it. Like, you had to stick with the proving to people that you weren't making this out of some sick desire to like humiliate the Japanese people, that you actually viewed this person as such an artist that you wanted to, which makes sense of the guy that wrote Taxi Driver is the one that was most fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I guess why Schrader?
I don't know. I didn't invite me.
Oh, I don't mean here.
Oh.
I know what you mean by that. Anybody who does publicity for your film, they come down to you because it's easier than getting someone from the kabuki company who plays a part in it.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm the only one representing the film who speaks English, so I end up having to do the lion's share of all of this.
It isn't enough to have made the film. Now you have to go out and talk about it.
But
why you were the one who got that subject, when I would have thought in my naive way that plenty of people would have thought, here's a movie just aching to be made.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of persistence involved, and also I've been involved, my brother and I involved in Japan in and out now for about 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 4 years of negotiating with the estate to secure the rights to the novels. Basically we could have made an agreement the first day, but then it takes another 4 years to prove your intentions. I think I was the only one who had the patience and the foolhardiness to actually stick it out.
Mm-hmm. Did you read any of those many books with variations on the title, How to Do Business with the Japanese?
No. I had a little connection with Japan and Japanese before it became a publishing industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of figured these things out before the how-to books came out.
Yeah. I suppose the general reaction here was when he committed suicide in that dramatic, movie-like way, was the guy had to be crazy. Can the American consciousness or whatever ever understand this? Can you understand it?
Well, that's sort of a misnomer right there, in that we have a tendency to say we can't understand Mishima because we're Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Believe me, the Japanese do not understand him either. He is as unfathomable to them.
Yeah.
Perhaps more so because they feel they should understand him, and we just assume we can't,
and
maybe therefore we can understand him better. And he was the most peculiar man, and a puzzle of a man who was a prodigy as a writer, and wrote very quickly and became famous very young, and then grew disenchanted with words themselves and gradually turned himself into one of his own characters, one of his own creations. And so that his final work is his death. And it was staged as one would stage a theater production. The location was selected, the audience was notified, the press was notified, the date was known a year in advance. He designed the costumes and he wrote the script. And he cloaked it in a kind of political facade in order to give it a greater importance. But basically what it was the final interior drama that he had been acting out and reacting for 20 years.
He has to be one of the strangest men who ever lived, because you'd think that, first of all, it would be enough for most people to have a wife and a family and a very successful writing career and all of that. And without having to also rebuild your body, have a private army, to become a target almost. He would willingly go to places where he knew he would be booed and hissed and so forth. His very controversial Confessions of a Mask, his first book, which was a biography of a young man's developing homosexuality, among other things. So he had just almost everything you could imagine was part of his life, and the mixture was.
I think that the secret of his life was that he was really a functioning schizophrenic, and that that he could move very easily between all these masks and guises. In fact, he felt very comfortable behind each mask. And if you were a literary friend, you were going to have dinner with him, the agenda of your conversation would be known, and you would discuss this. And you would not be allowed to discuss another subject. Your homosexual friend, that you would behave in a certain way. And none of these masks ever met. And I think probably because in the center, there was just a big hole. And all there was all these sides, and then he grew to this notion that true harmony in life, all these contradictions can only be harmonized in death. And as one of his biographers wrote about him, he had a lifelong sexual desire for death. That's strange. And I guess that's crazy.
But sex and death have always been tied together. I mean, the orgasm being a small little death in Shakespeare, all the puns about death and to die.
John Donne.
All right, Dick Cavett.
Yeah.
The first John Donne. And but I think that if I can regain my train of thought.
Not going to regain the train of thought.
No way. It's just like this show. There's no way you're going to regain your train of
thought. Not after Dick Cavett says that.
No chance.
No, I have the second part where the interview continues after that. But I just wanted to. That was a good starting point with how Paul Schrader kind of views him as an international figure, as someone who, and I think that is the key point that he said, the Japanese feel like they should understand him and they don't understand him any better than anybody else. But because he is Japanese, they feel like, well, maybe they should. And it's no, there's a level of insanity, I think, there that's so vast that no one can really understand him, but maybe it makes it so that he's easier to understand by audiences that aren't necessarily Japanese. And the Japanese still feel, at least at the point when this movie is made, still feel incredibly embarrassed about talking about him, and his suicide and his death. And I think he knew that was going to be the case. Like Mishima himself, I'm sure that he knew that, his luster or whatever would be lost by this act of ultimate lust and death.
How do you think Kanye is going to die?
I hope the same way. He takes over a school in Pennsylvania.
Coming that facing her.
His last speech though, he's pacing around and he's like Beyonce had the best album of all time, and then
I'm gonna let you finish.
I'm gonna let your school day finish.
I just can't let go of the idea that Kanye is our Mishima now.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's quite really no corollary because we just don't have those same levels of cultural icons anymore.
No, you're right.
Yeah. And arguably never have, but it's so funny that the entire restructuring of Japanese culture post World War II is sort of how do we find our way back out of this national shame, and then have a bunch of people be like, oh, not like that though. No, not like that.
Yeah.
It's meme worthy, right?
No.
You know who I would, what? I mean, there are figures, I think, within, how badly we've treated African Americans in our society. I'd say almost in some weird way, Booker T. Washington or somebody who at the time that slavery was abolished and Black people were so immiserated within the United States that when they did start to have literary figures like that who were kind of I mean, I don't think Booker T. Washington was like a nut job, but like who were kind of, you know, incredibly controversial and still are. Like it was almost like people would close ranks around them because it was like, you know, there aren't that many people in that situation. But the difference between Japan, I think, and, you know, the United States is that every time like a figure rose up within, you know, the Black community, like we, you know, the power structure would do everything they could to kind of tarnish that figure. And in Japan, I don't think it was necessarily the same thing. Now, I think that in Mishima's case, he tarnished himself over and over again, but I don't think anybody else really was doing that to him.
You know, just kind of running through some history, because after the war, the United States did occupy Japan up until 1962. So, which is a long time. Like we, you know, we don't think about that because, like, you know, 1962, we're way over, you know, World War II at that point. That's when some people say America was great. You know, both liberals and conservatives. And then, you know, America left in 62. You also see like if you watch Japanese noir, you can kind of track a little bit of this because like the early noir, you very much see like Americans in the background. Like I was actually very surprised. Like what movie was that? Cruel Gun Story had more Black people than any, like all of the filmography of John Hughes put together in you know the background of this movie, which is amazing to me. You know, but you know,
the only time John Hughes had any Black people in his movie is when he was making them scary, and then he would have Anthony Michael Hall do an incredibly offensive Black voice.
Yes. Yeah. No, but you know, it's but you actually see like Americans in the background of a lot of these scenes, and it caught me off guard the first time I ever watched a Japanese noir because I was not expecting that. And then after 62, you know, they became something wholly unique. You know, especially like again going back to Tokyo Drifter, for example, not to be confused with Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, which is a whole other movie.
I'm so glad you distinguished.
Yeah. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. By the way, second Tokyo Drifter reference. Take a drink.
All right.
But yeah, you but if you watch this progression of the genre, you can actually see like and honestly, like Japanese noir was the underside of Japan. Like it's not the part that they're proud of. Whereas if you look at
the same, which works because it's the same way in the United States during World War II. You know, like they're kind of showcasing that because they're like you know, as we talked about with Eileen Jones, like their entire infrastructure had failed.
Yeah, and there's just this. It's really fascinating to kind of watch it because it really is like this unique. It's a lot more honest too than American noir as well, because American noir had to like go around the Hays Code. They didn't have such thing as in Japan. So they were actually tell very interesting and dark and compelling stories. And like I said, you can actually see like the fingerprints of that in this movie. Like even the black and white scenes, like it was very like I said, I could have swore like a Quentin Tarantino was going to come on and just be like, I was really, like how Quentin Tarantino just like orgasms about films. Whenever he talks about like stuff, but like really the visuals of this genre is like very much shown in this movie, and which is actually kind of interesting. And also to know that like that wasn't actually the intent. It just happens to be the end goal of it. The end result is even more interesting. I want to know more.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the stigma, I think, with stuff in Japan at this time, though, is also like social stigma, right? Like, shame is a very big part of their culture. And I think you can tell that intrinsically throughout the entire movie of Mishima. Like, people feel ashamed of something, and killing yourself is more of an option in that case. Like, we like in the US, we kind of allow ourselves to get fully shamed. And then, we have stories like Death of a Salesman or whatever that, people are kind of kicked around to the point where they do end up killing themselves. But like, I think it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more of an option, I think, within this culture. And it makes it interesting that Mishima is this person who kind of, by all accounts, kind of should or maybe should isn't the right word, but like probably should be able to, like, is kind of at the top of his game when he kills himself, right? Like, and they make that clear throughout this movie. He's like, well, I don't think people should get much older than like 40. Like, you start to decay, you're at the height of your beauty. And like, I don't know, it's just kind of, it's fascinating to me in that case. And he also, you know, they show at the beginning, he's like calling his wife, or, you know, his wife and kids are out, and he like gets into his car, and he's at the top of his artistic game. He's like moved into all these different multimedia platforms, I think. And that's when he chooses to do it, rather than at a time where he feels the moment of ultimate humiliation, I think, when everybody kind of just boos his speech. But like up until that point, he's kind of at the height of everything. Nobody really pries into his affairs to know that he's creating like this, you know, right-wing militia behind the scenes.
Well, again, to him, it's a return to traditional values, right? But like,
as militias are here too.
Yeah, as they generally are. But I like that he doesn't even he has the chutzpah and the arrogance to not even like coach it in like, you know, coded terms, right? Like, once again, like he just be like, we need to return to the emperor, and it's like, all right, man, who let this guy in? Like, what's like, but in a way that. And I guess we're just gonna keep talking about that guy. I guess like only Kanye West will kind of be like, well, I guess. I mean, that's kind of nuts, but it's gonna be more seriously considered than if it was someone that was just like some nobody or something, right? Like Dave Sim can say the most misogynist things in the world, and nobody's not a comics nerd gives a good goddamn, because nobody like Sarah is like the dog from hell. But like he can go off about his like crazy ass nonsense in his little corner of the world, and it's not going to be national news. And he did.
Yes.
a lot.
Yes.
A lot.
but that's I mean, yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry. I
was gonna say the only other thing I can think of in popular culture would be like, I don't know, James Ellroy, but it's like noir was not that popular, right? Like, I
James
mean, like
Patterson.
I mean, James Ellroy was like Hemingway, right? Like with Hemingway's profile, or I don't know, Henry Miller, maybe. I'm trying to think of like there isn't like, okay, if Charles Dickens in England, right? Like at that time would be like, you know, the biggest, like having that level of influence, but like just saying like nutty things. But like that's
cooked
earnestly
goose
believed
for everyone.
By the way, personally, I cannot stand Charles Dickens. I find him incredibly boring and tedious as a writer. I'm talking about level of fame.
No, yeah, no, I know what you're saying.
Cultural cachet.
But I mean, there's also like,
so Kanye, basically.
It's interesting. It's interesting though, like building up this sense of nationalism, like you know, bringing it back to like black culture here. Like Haile Selassie is like, who's like, you know, the proclaimed like emperor of Ethiopia. Within you know, Jamaican society, and like Rastafarianism is seen as this like larger than life figure. And it's like, you know, there is always kind of when people are like, we should return to these values, they kind of inflate and create these figures in their heads that aren't necessarily doing like the things they're doing, but are dynastic and are like this monarch or something that's gonna, you know, save everybody from their immiseration. And it does seem like there's a lot of that within Mishima's thought process. Like, he's like, oh, well, only if we had this emperor back. Like, despite the fact that we did have the emperor and we lost World War II, like, we need to bring the emperor back and then everything will be all right. Like, you know, that is like, it's a divine right almost, in that sense.
And fun fact, Hirohito was emperor of Japan until 1989.
Yeah, I was gonna say exactly. Yeah. With ironic thing, I mean, not in the same way, but there actually was an emperor. Yeah,
and there still is.
Yeah.
Current emperor is Naruhito.
Yeah, but because Hirohito died in 89, right?
Yeah, it was.
Hirohito was alive until 89.
Until 89, which is like most of our lifetimes except for Forrest, because Forrest is a baby.
Oh.
But that's the thing, right? Like, one of the things that the Japanese didn't want to do is remove their emperor. Like that kind of, in some ways, we wanted to remove their emperor, like at the end of the war, and we realized that no, like they're not going to surrender regardless of what happens. You know, if that's one of the things that we work into this, obviously, you know, at this point, the emperor is brought down like in stature, and the hierarchy is what's really important to this. And the fact that, you know, he's raging at capitalists, right? Like they've supplanted where the emperor's status was within society. They're kind of running society, and the emperor is kind of thrown to the side. So his entire thing is like, no, things wouldn't change except that those capitalists would be pushed aside, brought back down to where by I guess divine right almost that they should be, and the emperor would be in control of everything again. So it's not even like a supplantation of like that part of the hierarchy. It's just kind of like, well, we've turned this guy into a figurehead. He should be, you know, the one in control. And the military should be in the military, which was originally like kind of, you know, Ronin, like the samurai, like the military should be put back in control of everything, and they should be the ones running things. So it's like, it is fascism. I mean, it's fascism at its core. Like it's the most
yes, I agree with all those points. But what makes this an interesting movie is that could be an entire movie in and of itself, and it's like one part of like it's like 1 out of 8 parts of the 4-part movie that like is relevant. It's just the most baffling because there's really not a precedent for it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think
they struggle to come up with an analogy, right?
You're getting into his psyche, right?
I got an analogy. It's like all the people who dragged Jason Lee after he announced that Queen Elizabeth died. This happened right before Russia invaded Ukraine, so nobody remembers this.
No, I do remember that. I do remember that, and he insisted that she was dead, and I still insist that she's dead. So I agreed with that.
I think she's been dead for years, but
no, I think the Queen died back in November, and that they've been, you know, they've been hiding it.
We ended up burning her.
They Photoshop her into pictures. Well, they said the Queen's entering her final form in February. The royal family announced that on their Twitter page. What the fuck could her final form be? And she got COVID around that time. What could her final form be besides dead?
I made that meme that had her being Mothra. I answered that in meme form, which is the only appropriate response. It's her final form.
I love the format of this movie, though. Let's talk about.
I was gonna say, I love the format of this movie way more than I do the format of this show right now.
Oh,
hey!
But it's like, I do love that the unique approach of it, where it's like we're not just gonna tell the story of this guy's life. We're gonna talk about. I mean, and really, like they mostly just show like that last day of his life, right? But then they go back through and like the flashbacks are mostly like there's some biographical stuff, but there's like, you know, flashing into his art, which is very unusual. And I really appreciate the approach that Paul Schrader and Leonard and all the whole crew took on that.
And also, have we mentioned it was like produced by George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola? Have we mentioned that?
Hadn't. They raised, they raised $10 million to make this movie, and it was $500,000.
Because can you imagine pitching this movie? Can you imagine what does that pitch meeting look like?
Yeah.
All right, sit tight. I've got the blockbuster of the summer.
I think they just already liked him. They already liked Paul Schrader.
Yeah, they're like, what? It's like Paul Schrader's doing it.
They knew it wasn't going to make money.
It's like how Tarantino got his name on the movie Hero whenever it got released in the States, because no studio was going to release probably one of China's best wushu film, Hero, and Quentin Tarantino's like, no, you got to release it, and it was like Quentin Tarantino presents, and it's like, really, you have to? Okay, fine. That's how it's going to get released.
I want to enter this into the record, by the way. Mishima wrote 34 novels, 50 plays, 25 books of short stories, and at least 35 books of essays, 1 libretto, as well as 1 film. So that's like, you know, they picked 3 novels, 3 of his most famous novels, which
which are very different in tone. Yeah, that's sorry, okay. What were you saying?
I was just saying, should we mention which ones they are that get incorporated, or are we assuming that people have seen it who are listening right now?
Well, if they haven't seen it, they're going to get it completely spoiled by this. No, so the first one is, the first one was the most interesting in some ways because I think it's different than the tone of the rest of them. Yeah. The Temple of the Golden Pavilion, which I have a short clip that I'm not going to play yet, but it's Mishima talking in France about contemporary literature, and he mentions that the one novel at that point that had been translated into French that had gotten big in France is that one. So this is kind of an internationally known and renowned and novel at this point. Well, especially after his death, I think, but like, you know, even during his life, like it had become kind of this international phenomenon. And I think it is an interesting, it's a pubescent novel in a lot of ways, right? Like,
it's coming of age.
Yeah.
In a very kind of weird, I mean, it's an interesting story. And I think the way it's presented, like how the Golden Temple is like, again, like Erica said, like almost like a stage play or something, right? Where you have to use your imagination, and they use it as like forced perspective to a certain degree. We're sure like, wait, what's with the, that's just like, it's small, but they're behaving as if it's big, her words. And I think that we have a lot of different things that are done with the set dressing like that are fantastic, that are just like making an incredible use of like limited space to just create a world. Really. Mm-hmm. And I think that's amazing. But yeah, I think that was the first time I was sort of like, oh, this is interesting. What's this all about? You know, it was my initial reaction to that bit of it. But yeah, I mean, it's very clear that like, you know, like whatever, I forget the character's name, but the friend character was just sort of like pickup artist in 1950. Yeah, like I don't think it ever says. We're sort of like,
I was trying to write it down, and I was waiting to write it down, and I'm sure that I could find it on Google, but I don't think they ever say the guy's name. I named him Frog Feet.
Frog Feet.
His name, yeah, he does have a name in the book, but they don't mention it in the movie.
They don't mention it in the movie, but he goes right up. He goes right up to the point of like saying that you should neg the girl, you know, where it's like it's like okay, whatever.
He's Jeffrey Dahmer without the murder.
Right. Exactly.
No, he's doing the pickup artist thing, right? Like,
yeah, that's
we're gonna teach you how to turn your incel skull shape
into an outcel
gorilla mindset.
Yeah, well, no, and that is an entire culture now, right? Like incels that believe that they have the wrong forehead shape or something, that like their forehead shape is not the most appealing one to. They're all over Reddit. Yeah, so they believe that they have the wrong skull shape and they have a forehead that's too.
Phrenology's back, baby.
Look, there sure is a lot of internet, isn't there?
So they can't just like talk to women like they're people.
No, and
form an actual connection with somebody, and then
there's people that are in their 30s that have never slept with anybody or something, and the community names
involuntarily celibate.
And there was a ContraPoints video, really amazing video. I don't know if you know Natalie Wynn, ContraPoint. She's like one of the most famous kind of transgender artists, and she had a video about being transgender where she talks about how there's like transgender communities that she felt like were a lot like incel communities, because they would kind of explain, like these people would kind of go on Reddit and like basically nag each other, and they would post pictures and be like, oh well, the reason that you're this way is because you're too masculine, like your face is too masculine, and they would like really just pick apart each other's looks. And she realized that this was this incredibly toxic culture, and then she realized like that's how incels kind of feel, and going through that entire thing. This movie kind of does the same exact thing. And this guy's like, well, listen, I figured out how to use the pickup artist thing, which kind of is something that, the people in those communities lose out on money, because all of a sudden these guys are like, well, I can show you how to actually get girls. You use those flaws as a
just buy my book.
Point.
These instructional seminar videos. Yeah. Like,
and you'll get the gorilla mindset.
Gorilla mindset is all supplements. It's all about.
When I read the synopsis of that, not even the synopsis, it was like a brief description of the plot of that book. I was like, what? How do you write a whole book about that? It was just like, guy burns a temple down because he thinks it's too beautiful. And I was like, But there is a lot more to it, for the record.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, it has to do with. It has to do with like him coming of age too, and like like it is definitely like, I mean, it's cool looking.
Yeah.
I've also never been like, that's so beautiful it needs to not exist. Yeah, that's.
But I mean, that is kind of the incel thing, right?
Also, to hell with Charles Dickens. Yes, you're right, Charles.
That is kind of like the whole incel thing. Like you blame the women. You're like, oh, these women are too beautiful. They'll never accept me. And in that same way, it's kind of, you can look into his own, I guess, psyche.
Wait till I burn down the temple, then they'll accept me. Exactly.
Or in this case, it's almost like burning down the women, like in some way. You know what I mean? Like but in this, it's kind of a more metaphorical thing. And you can look at it in terms of his own kind of warped psyche, and looking at his body and finding his body to be disfigured, which it wasn't, to be fair. Like Mishima, but he was like kind of a frail.
But that was some weird
dude.
manscaping there at the end.
Yeah, you noticed that
obsessed
too,
with
huh?
that. He gets incredibly obsessed with that, and like you can see that from this novel, right? Like at least the parts of the novel that they cherry pick, like they're kind of leading up to this point, and then the next thing after that is he has that conversation with his much younger homosexual lover, and who says, "Oh, looking a little flabby," and he freaks out about that and realizes like, no, I need to rebuild my entire body.
Yeah, and then he like changes his entire like life around like rebuilding his body because of somebody made one snide catty little comment.
Do you guys know if he really was raised as a girl by his grandmother?
Yeah, I didn't look into that part of it, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean,
I couldn't tell if it was real or not.
I mean, that would make sense for the machismo part. Like it's complete overcorrection, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also, it's an interesting thing to have kabuki be kind of brought into that, right? Like Japanese theater, and that like really does sometimes turn like male actors into female actors, but it's something that Shakespeare did too, and like it's fascinating. And I think that in some ways is Paul Schrader doing a little bit of over explaining by being like, well, we wear many masks,
Yeah, that's what Miss Saigon was about too, right?
What?
Isn't that what Miss Saigon's about, or am I missing?
But no, so like
Anyway, back to Mishima. But I think that that's the first story, not counting the joiner pieces, is like when you see like the Golden Temple and it's like, oh, that looks cool. Like, the first thing you think of before you even know it's gonna like play like this big factor in the story is, again, like it looks like a stage play, Forrest perspective. It's like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, oh wow, it's cool that like, but you can envision where they're going with it, like how the scene would be like, in an actual outside, like, with nature and stuff like that, et cetera, but like stripping it down to the barest elements of like, again, like a small play or something where you just, none of that matters. All that matters is, and then you're wondering, well, why is the temple there? And they're like, oh, that's why. Okay.
That part where he walks through the trees and he puts in the hay and he lights it on fire, and then when he runs back through and the trees are red. Yeah. Oh, I'm dead about that.
It's freaking impressive.
I died.
It is.
I was like, oh, that's so gorgeous. It was gorgeous.
Just like the man himself at the end. Spoilers. Yeah. And I
don't believe in spoilers. I just believe in me.
When it opens
makes
up,
perfect
too,
sense.
like
it makes perfect sense going back to the 50 plays, right? Like this guy kind of was thinking about all of these things in terms of plays. It does make sense that they do design it like that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and it's impressive because it gets the point across and does in a way that actually makes you think more about like the action that's happening than if you actually saw it. Like if there was actual like, oh, the set's on fire now, then it would be like that wouldn't be nearly as cool.
Yeah. So going.
So that's the first one. That's I forget what the name of that bit is, but.
Yeah. So going into the second one is interesting too, and the second one's Kyoko's house.
Right.
Which introduces you to this concept of kind of pain as pain and death as like a sexual thing, and they touch on this in the Dick Cavett interview. I guess not in the part, and I'm sure they'll touch on it in the second clip that I play at the end of this part of it. But a lot of Japanese girls, I guess at this time, it was kind of famous, were into this very violent form of pornography, where kind of pain was the art itself. So, this is kind of the erotica form of that, I think. Doing that entire thing as an erotica novel in some ways.
Yoko Ono also kind of famously played with that idea with some of her performance art.
Rad.
Right.
She would like
just like she cut the Beatles. No.
no. She had a pair of scissors and just invited men to come up.
Stop it with that.
Snip off her clothes, and like you can cut off however little or much as you want, and she would sit there and see how far she could push it before she would walk off stage. But like that was her performance, and it's.
And so the
seems
chapter
weird, but like with the context of that pornography,
Yeah. So Kyoko's house
Well,
is
in the
it's
art world, that makes sense.
right, and this is like more like sadomasochism, right? Like it's sort of like the idea is like, it's like a masochistic relationship between like the woman and like the young man, and like they're both, it's transactional to a certain degree, like they're both getting something out of it, but there is like something beyond that there, and it's probably the most. Well, I know that Schrader wanted to include another book of his that has like a gay man in a marriage as well, and like the widow was like, nope, like hell you were, because like she knew that like he was trying to like, you know, blend reality and the movies and whatnot. That was the only one that like she apparently denied. But yeah, this one is sort of like, it's interesting because it's I mean, it's a different kind of period piece than the first one, than the Temple of the Golden Pavilion, and it's a different kind of point in time, but like you can kind of still see the through line to it, and it's, you know, it's not really judgmental necessarily. It's just sort of like, it's exploratory. Like that's the exploratory part of the film, and it's exploratory in a lot of ways for the content.
Yeah, I liked the concept of that though, where it was like each of the 4 main characters, I guess, in that book are all like different facets of himself, and like I guess like how they interact. Well, I didn't get into that. I didn't get to read the book because, you know, I should
say that this novel, Kyoko's House, is published in 1959. So
same year as Temple of the Golden Pavilion, right?
I'll look that up now, but
okay.
Yeah,
I think so
it's
real-time fact checks here. Movie Night Extravaganza. Forbidden Colors is the one I was thinking of. That's
published in 1956. So it's
the Temple was.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, it's a 3-year difference. It's not much of probably a difference, but you know, it's still kind of within the same time period, I think, right? And both of those are kind of exploratory. I mean, they're both also sexually exploratory, I think, but like, you know, this idea of beauty as something that needs to get burned down in the first one, and as he kind of, you know, later with all you know, making sure that you knew the metaphor was coming, like he stands
the metaphor called ahead in this scenario, but yes.
Yeah, like but yeah, so like, you know, the idea of like burning beauty down in its prime, like when you can't take it anymore or whatever, and then the second one kind of as pain as something that's like liberating. And I should say that each of these parts of the story or each of these novels, you don't see the violence in this part of it. It flips to the next one before you see the final
act.
Yeah,
you're right, because they don't show every piece of the book. It's sort of like they sort of save that ultimately as a film towards the end. Like you get to see like the lead up, and it's like each one gets to be like a different facet of the self, and a different facet of the personification of what his ideals were, or in some cases, like, you know, things that he went through or perceived that he went through, like through allegory, you know.
Yeah. Which brings us to a decade later, 1969, Runaway Horses, which was my favorite one of the 3 novels.
Shocking.
Nice. Oh, sorry.
I just think of the Stooges song, but that's also good.
and you know, that one kind of is the most heavy-handed. That was the word I was looking for earlier, but you know, the most heavy-handed metaphor, because you know, that is a story of, you know, they literally say, we'll assassinate the leaders of capitalism, burn down the Bank of Japan. At dawn, law will restore the emperor, or restore power to the emperor. And so that's kind of that point in time where he's like,
it's like, cool, what?
Yeah. And it makes a lot of sense the way Andy phrased it, where it's like, you know, 1962, the U.S. kind of left. And the first 2 novels, he wasn't really exploring those concepts. And I don't know. I mean, he wrote so much shit, so who knows, you know, what he was saying in the other ones. But like, you know, 1969, the U.S. is gone, and he can kind of start exploring.
1968, Capitalism is Good. Actually, you don't remember that book?
Wow, really a divergence from the rest of the world, because 1968 was the year of revolutions everywhere else.
Mishima definitely marched to the beat of his own drummer. That's for sure.
Yeah, so there's a very heavy-handed line. At sunrise on a cliff, paying reverence to the sun, looking down at the sea, will commit seppuku. And that's the moment you kind of realize what's coming for quite literally for Mishima. Like you realize, oh, that's what he's looking to do.
Yeah, that's his end goal. That's the future state that he's looking for. Yeah.
His final form.
I should say also right before this, they talk about the war itself, World War II, and a little bit before this, it's before I guess the second Kyogo's house thing. My favorite line in this, Mishima says, "I'd always dreamed of dying on the battlefield. So why did I lie? Why did I exaggerate my illness?" Because he says, he pretends he has tuberculosis. And he says, "My words were lies. I was a coward. I never wanted to die." And you kind of take it to 1969, where at this point where he started to explore the idea of seppuku. His body is rebuilt at this point. And he's each time you see him in the car with these, young militia men, I guess, these young, army kids, and they want to come with him wherever he's going. You don't know where that is, but they're like, "No, you guys have to go to court. You guys have to defend what happens here. We're going to go there." So you don't know exactly what's happening, but they're kind of leading up to this story, I think.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
So in this story, the kid is training to be, he's training with wooden swords, and he doesn't want to train with wooden swords anymore. He wants the real sword, and he gets into a room with some officer in the Japanese army, and he's talking about I have this militia that I've kind of put together, which you're like, yeah, all right, like we know that Mishima is in the same fucking position, like he has this militia he's put together, and he's like, if who would you assassinate if you had to assassinate 10 people? And he lists off these Japanese officials. So like, who would you assassinate if you could be 5 people? He lists off this like a smaller list, and then he says, what about one person? And he lists off the one person that he would I think I wrote down the guy's name, but
he was a businessman though, right?
Kurihara. Yeah, well, I mean, I'd assume he was probably like the finance minister or something.
Yeah, okay.
They don't really specify who it is, but like I'd assume that's probably who the guy would have been.
Yeah.
But throughout this, that's when he's the left has occupied Tokyo University. They're interspersing it with moments from Mishima's own life, where he's like, "Oh, I'll challenge all these kids to a debate, trying to recruit more kids at Tokyo University." So they're very much heavy-handedly building you up to realize, like, no, this is going to end in an act of violence of some kind. This guy's kind of completely lost his mind at this point. During that, he also poses with the sword. He poses as which we didn't touch on, but as he discovers his homosexuality the first time, or bisexuality, whatever it is, he gets turned on by a picture of a knight, and he recreates the picture of the knight where he's hung up to a tree, left to die. So all these themes are kind of being thrown at you at once in a very heavy-handed way, but also kind of in an intense way where you're like, oh fuck, like.
Which Voltaire, which I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a not the philosopher, but the singer. Voltaire released an album.
Not familiar.
I'm going somewhere with this.
Deep cut here.
Released an album with the same image on it, and he actually said, like, Ziggy Stardust, just gay enough. That album cover, too fucking gay. So, that was my first thought when I saw that scene. I think he's also wrong. Like, there's no such thing as too fucking gay. But
my thought when I saw the ppicture was, why is my hand doing that? It's going right to my right there. Just like Mishima. So maybe I'm Mishima.
There you go.
It's such an interesting quote when he sees it for the first time. He's like, my hand started doing something that I didn't know it was like I had never trained.
I bet it did. Yeah.
And it's after you kind of see it's after you kind of see the kid with the stutter he's gonna get a hand job, and he and he's trying and he's supposed to touch the girl's like breast, and like there's the whole thing, and he realizes, oh, you're too beautiful, I don't want to do that, and backs away from all of it.
I can't get through the force shield.
Yeah.
Is that what it? Oh.
But
I didn't pick up on that. That was why he couldn't figure it out.
Well, I don't know if that was why, but I mean, it's open to interpretation, I think, to a certain degree. But yeah, I mean, like, it's there's a lot of there's a lot of sexual tension that's put out in weird ways and channeled in very unorthodox. I'm not trying to be judgmental, very unorthodox ways. The most unorthodox, of course, is the organized coup, but we're not at that point yet. So
yeah, no, I'm trying to build to that, and
it's almost like you just hope that, like, you know, some good-hearted man or woman would just you know, take one for the team or something. But anyway, yeah.
So
Like,
this is probably a good point to pause this, and I want to play a clip of Mishima around this time that I found on Criterion.
oh, cool.
And you know, it doesn't necessarily relate fully. He does talk about the Temple of the Golden Pavilion. This is what he looked like, and kind of. I think it is important to realize the level of charisma this guy kind of actually did have.
Yeah, we're focusing on the kind of like, well, that's weird. Oh, that's also weird. This also is weird. Also, this is weird. But like, the fact is, like, he was a pretty charismatic dude,
And he was very handsome, very chiseled, I think. And people did recognize that. I mean, you know, whether or not they agreed with his
people are
idea.
talking about it more and more, actually.
So he's getting interviewed by a French interviewer at this point.
Yeah.
So when are we going to do the recording of us doing this in English?
Oh,
So
Okay.
no, but so this is 1962 that clip was from, and
okay.
I think it's important for a few reasons to. There's one where he goes on to talk about the atom bomb and the effect that had on everybody, which maybe we could play after this. But you know, I think it's fascinating to look at. He's coherent. He's a handsome guy. He is clearly, you know, maybe not fluent, but like, you know, pretty fluent in French. He was also pretty fluent in English. Like, you know, he's kind of someone who can represent the Japanese people, ready to downplay the political implications of everything he's writing about. And he can represent the Japanese people who had kind of been through this incredibly shameful period on a world stage to people who they're kind of trying to elaborate their own stance to. And at this point, as they said in this, most of his works have been translated into English and you know, were very popular in America. Temple of the Golden Pavilion, which, you know, came out years before, but like had been translated at this point into French, which French is kind of the most one of the most romanticized cultures, I guess, in that way. And he can hold his own, I think, in those interviews, right? Like, they're not condescending necessarily. They're having a conversation with him about literature. So you can kind of see why a people, I think, that felt that much shame about where they were really wanted to hold on to him and really didn't want him to explode in a blaze of glory, like I think a lot of people felt like he was going to, but didn't want to admit.
Kanye is truly the perfect example because, like, you know, it's like when Kanye showed up at the White House to visit Trump, you know, people really did, you know, explode the same way that and of embarrassment, you know, that they had, you know, what is it, Going Off to College or whatever the hell his album is.
I feel like I would be canceled by classic film people if I hashtag this like film Twitter, and they're gonna be like, dude, you compared Mishima to Kanye.
So many times too. You can't even pretend you didn't.
There's no political implication to it at all, though. No, so I want to continue on with the second part of this interview. It's interesting. He talks about the atom bomb in World War II and the impact that he thinks that had on Japanese culture, and then we can talk about him as a figure. I think watching these, I started to feel a lot more not sympathetic, but a lot more understanding, I think, about how he was viewed within Japan and why people, because in this movie you like see a general be like, no, wait, don't kill yourself. You took me hostage. That's okay. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you start to wonder, like, oh, would there have been no consequences for him then if, you know, he hadn't killed himself? Like, would the guy have been like, it was a misunderstanding or something? Like, I mean, who knows what the result would have been? But like, I think you start to understand a lot more why this was a figure that kind of needed to be protected.
Quelle est l'influence de la télévision dans la vie de l'écrivain japonais? Est-ce pour lui un nouveau moyen d'expression? De nos jours, la télévision au Japon
à la télévision. Elle a tendance à donner sa préférence au spectacle télévisé plutôt qu'à la lecture. Malgré tout, cette formule du feuilleton est tellement enracinée dans les esprits que les écrivains continuent à publier d'abord leurs romans dans les revues littéraires, faire apparaître des œuvres d'imagination abordant le sujet d'un point de vue plus objectif. Je me permets de vous citer l'exemple de mon roman La Belle Étoile. Actuellement, le romancier Izusa publie un livre consacré à la bombe sous la forme du journal d'une jeune fille d'Hiroshima morte dans la catastrophe atomique. C'est un bon roman et écrit dans un esprit extrêmement objectif.
Yep.
But I mean, he's able to translate that, right? Like, this is a, no pun intended, but this is an event that's incredibly hard for us to deal with, but we've turned it into art and literature. Like, it's something that's kind of, so deeply rooted in our hearts, but it's something that we've managed to turn into creative output, which I think in the European context is like incredibly important. You're sitting there being like, oh shit, like, yeah, this is a creative culture that they've kind of built out of the ashes of a lot of really fucked up shit.
And what year was this interview?
I think it's 1962.
Okay, because 67 is when Grave of the Fireflies was written as a short story, which became a very phenomenally good anime.
Yeah, we talked about that during the My Neighbor Totoro.
Yeah, well, it's also Studio Ghibli, but it's not Miyazaki.
Yeah.
All right. Let the record show. So I think that also, is it a flex that he is shifting from French back to Japanese? I think it's a bit of a flex, right? It has to be.
Yeah. And there's other interviews where he does the same thing with English.
Yeah.
You don't think it's just that he might feel like he can express himself more clearly in Japanese?
No, it is that he can
probably
express himself more clearly in Japanese. But the thing is that the fact that he can speak French, the fact that he is kind of this international figure, I think it's a big part of it. I mean, world leaders like to do that a lot. World leaders a lot of times like to say part of what they have to say in one language and then another part in another, because it's showing that they have a grasp on your culture.
Remember Tim Kaine?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
God damn it, I forgot about Tim Kaine. Harmonica Dad.
Pete Buttigieg, breaking out, the 3 words he actually knows in whatever language he's saying.
In Esperanto, whatever the hell he claimed he knew. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I can speak 5 languages too. I just can't speak any of them fluently. Hola. Konnichiwa.
But there's another saying that French is like the romanticized language, right? Like the literary tradition, I think, he's getting interviewed in French, like, oh, are there any French authors that really speak to you? Like, it's important, I think, for Mishima to be an international figure rather than kind of just a national author whose work is just being translated into maybe Chinese, maybe Korean, nearby cultures. I think it is important that he's translated in the West and that he does understand and is comfortable within these different Western cultures. And I think that says a lot about why and they show that in Mishima, right? He's speaking in English to them. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. He does the humility thing where he's like, my English isn't very good. And then he goes on to kind of give a fascist speech in English, which all right, but
a man before his time.
Wow, he just like me for real.
So it's wild too that he ostensibly is there because what they translated the one book, and that book was a success, and just let's find out more about this guy, and then they get the whole deal. The whole Mishima deal, which he's very happy to be on the world stage in that way, but he doesn't want to be there just because of his books. He wants to be there as a representative for Japanese culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important for him to do that, even if he isn't saying it necessarily. Much to, again, the eternal shame of his detractors and the haters. I don't know what we're gonna call them.
The haters and losers.
Haters and losers.
All right, so we've gone into
And I go back to my original thesis statement that Mishima would kill on Twitter if he was around today. Yeah, but anyway,
causing shame to his whole.
just causing shame for his entire populace and.
I mean, something though that I kind of am enamored is the wrong word, but impressed with, I guess, is that he manages to, despite like whatever you want to say about schizophrenia or mental illness, whatever Conan you specifically, no, but like whatever Paul Schrader wants to talk about while defending this movie, saying like, oh well, I think he was a schizophrenic. He manages to downplay his own political ambitions, right? And you don't necessarily
to the point that it seems surprising when you hear when you're like, oh, I would not have expected that of you, but it's like, oh, but then if you think about like his entire body of work, like everything kind of leads that way. Yeah,
or at least
but
it is
the
parts of his body of work that are cherry picked for this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which tend to be like some of the more popular ones. So
yeah,
it's not like they're like having to dig that far, frankly.
Oh no, they're not going into his old tweets to read his old tweets and say like, oh, in 2008 he said something that But no, but
remember when they did Forrest Miller, A Life in 4 Chapters, and one of them was just his old tweets? I remember that. Yeah.
It's just memes. They're like, look at that meme. He posted this meme and
sure posted a lot of memes this year, didn't he? Yeah. All right.
So the 4th chapter is and we should say the end of
thank you.
The end of the runaway horses one is that the guy we didn't actually go into the end of this. So the army kind of turns on him, or the army guy, and they realize that the army has been compromised by capitalism and by kind of this system, and the guy bails on them. And there's that I'm kind of blown away by how they did this. Everybody is in this kind of stage, and they're all meeting on a table, and after kind of all pledging their loyalty in this beautiful, which if we weren't there, you would see behind us. I mean, you can kind of see it. They're pledging their loyalty and standing out with the golden rising sun.
It looks like it'd be something. It's like, it's just your standard orb, people. It's just your standard orb. Like that kind of scene. But like out of context, you'd be like, what alien is gonna pop out of there, or whatever. But but it's a beautiful scene.
Yeah. And so they're meeting in this thing, and then all of a sudden you see this incredibly well done thing where there's an aerial footage of their meeting place, and then all of these soldiers run in and break the walls off. Like it's almost like they're meeting on this stage set. I mean, that is what it is, but they're meeting on the stage set, and they break the walls off of the set, and it's this almost operatic moment in time, and it's beautiful. And then he's brought into this once again stage set jail, and he's being quizzed by the guy across from him. It was like, oh, well, we torture people who don't want to talk, and you hear the kind of the screams of torture behind him. It's like, well, you do want to talk, and he doesn't talk. And then they don't show you how he escapes from jail. He just kind of runs off the set, and he stabs the guy that he wanted to stab, and then commits seppuku. And so you're kind of very heavy-handedly brought into this situation. And right before the other guy commits seppuku, they cut again because they don't show you the violence just yet. And you're brought into the situation where you're like, all right, well, I think I know what's going to happen in this 4th chapter. You're like, because they've made reference to it so many fucking times, and they've showed you the pictures of, I before we talk about the seppuku part of it specifically, I will play the Dick Cavett part where they're talking about this, but there's like, he has the samurai picture. He's obsessed with samurai. He says to the college campus, and there is a documentary now, I guess, that uses the footage from this, from like, I think 2015, where they're just talking. It's a documentary about his specific speech that he gave at Tokyo University when it was taken over. So they're finally kind of coming to terms with Mishima as someone who is not representative of their culture in that way, but like is a representative of that time, which I think is good. To come to terms with the fact that this is not something caused necessarily by Japanese culture. This is something that was in some ways wholly opposite or wholly other. You know what I mean? Like this is this own guy's issue, and it was incentivized by this culture because they do have this hierarchical way of viewing things. And I don't know if they get into all this in this documentary, but like they do have this hierarchical way of viewing things where this person is literally like, even the general that he takes hostage is deferential to him. So like, but he's a man.
It's kind of crazy, right? But,
yeah. He's like, no, wait, don't kill yourself. You have so much to live for.
Well, and in Runaway Horses, from what I read about it, there's a character from an earlier novel that Mishima wrote, who is further along in his career in Runaway Horses.
Yeah.
Like he was a law student in the first one. Now he's like a lawyer, maybe a judge or something, but he's like, and then he thinks that the main character of Runaway Horses is a friend of his reincarnated. And so he works to like keep him protected.
Okay.
I didn't know any of that, but
yeah, I thought that was a really interesting, like,
the more you know,
like point or facet or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And
I like that.
So I should also say that, and we didn't. I mean, well, there's no reason to talk about this part, but the beginning of the second story.
Then don't do it.
I was gonna say, but here it is anyway. Yeah.
no, I'm saying up until this point, there wasn't necessarily a reason to talk about this, but the beginning of the second chapter, they're in the car, and it's him and his guard in the car. They're talking about, oh, you don't have to do this. You don't have to. Oh no, you don't have to do this alone. Like, you know what I mean? They're doing that whole thing, and they cut away from that. He sees the bookstore, and he's the most prominently. There's a poster of his face, and he looks at.
Yeah, that's right. That's a cool scene. Yeah. But
it's really
like,
beautiful.
But it's also like, to him, it's sort of like that doesn't mean anything. Like, like, I forget what he says, but it's basically like, I don't care about that.
Yeah, well, I was trying to read his face to see what kind of reaction he would have, and it was like nothing.
Yeah, there was no reaction to it. But they do make sure to show you, like, it's his face and then the same face, and they're looking at the bookstore, and I thought that was a really cool shot. I don't know. That's all I wanted to say. No, but
but at that point, it's like
yeah.
My interpretation of that is he wasn't famous for the way he wanted to be famous at that point, and so that it was irrelevant to him in that way that.
He wasn't a famous rapper yet. He just made beats.
He hadn't.
Well, the only thing he didn't freaking do. I mean, come on.
He hadn't talked Kim Kardashian into marrying him yet.
Well, there's a whole thing with Kanye where he had a career as a famous beat. He was a producer.
No, we get it. Yeah, we get it. We don't need to explain to us. We get it. Yeah.
And then the end of the movie, he pitches his rap career to Jay-Z, and Jay-Z is like, yes, and the movie ends.
What hast thou wrought, Andy World? What hast thou wrought?
No, so they get to the second Runaway Horses part. They're all singing in the car. They're singing what you can assume, I think, is an old Japanese war song, army song.
Yeah. The equivalent of like a sea shanty or something along those lines, where it's like, "Hey, everybody, let's have a good time and sing this."
Yo
like,
ho, yo ho.
Like the halls of Montezuma or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Something. It's like, why is that the thing? You're okay.
Yo ho, a samurai's life for me. Anyway,
yeah, ostensibly, like more or less.
So the reason that I brought this up is that Harmony of Pen and Sword starts at that point. They're in the car. They're about to go into this general's the barracks pretty much, but they're about to go into the general's office in the barracks. And one of the things he says is, even in his present weakened condition, the army represented the ancient code of the samurai. So he sees the Japanese armed forces as a potential way to bring the samurai back to power. Anybody else want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, he did also bring up the Edo period during. No, never mind.
I mean, like, about what piece of it? Like about like the motivation or like the execution?
Is he like smoking weed and watching Akira Kurosawa movies and being like very into it?
Yo, that's just like me. No,
I mean, what he's definitely doing, and I can't reference this enough, is like him and his bodybuilding buddies are sitting around taking pictures of each other in various poses.
Well, taking pictures of him mostly. I mean,
mostly of him, but like, I mean, of each other too. But just like, that's like you do.
He's like, yo, take a picture of me with this. Take a picture of me with this. Yeah. All right, I guess you guys can get in here.
That didn't happen in the Schwarzenegger biographies I read as a kid. It was like, you're gonna put what in what? I men do that. It was fascinating being 8 years old and reading about gay sex from Arnold Schwarzenegger.
You put what in what? What did you put in what?
Wow.
No, but so they've built up this whole story to this point, and you realize that you're in this present moment, And you know, he has a samurai sword, which presumably is a real sword from the 1600s, but Paul Schrader kind of in the clip we're gonna watch, Paul Schrader kind of cast out, and he's like, well, he said it was. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so who knows what it really is?
Yeah,
but
well, also just keep in mind too, the handles of the swords change. The swords themselves, the blades might actually be from the time period, but the handle might not be. And like, it depends on which part of the sword you're looking at whenever you're talking about, you know, how old the sword is.
Resident swordologist J. Andrew World is here to tell
Hey,
you.
Japanese art history, bro.
I don't know.
It's coming in handy.
I'm glad you're here. I don't know.
No. And,
Doctor of Swords, J. Andrew World.
well, I mean, if you go to a good museum with Japanese art history, like they will have separate the blades from the handles.
Yeah.
They actually have like names to all this stuff. But
I mean, I literally have a katana.
I didn't realize
like,
that.
about a foot that way. It's just
but
out of
they
shot.
do that
So
just because like
I say
partly for storage and partly because like sometimes they're from very different periods, because like a samurai will like break the handle and would have to get it redressed, even though this is like the family sword or something.
Mhm.
so you guys we could talk over this. There's no sound to it. This is some footage
we will.
from the day of the seppuku, and this is the barrack that he invaded.
Is this like Faces of
This is
Death?
IRL. Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, this is him addressing the and I wish there
And
was
he's
sound
way
to it.
hotter than he was in the movie.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so these are the soldiers that he's addressing.
Which is why it was time for him to commit suicide.
And also, this is a lot. There's a lot more of them. There's a lot more of them. And this is they talked about earlier. There's the plane. I think they wanted flyers dropped, and so he's dropping flyers down. He has his people dropping flyers down, in the same way that they were talking about the plane dropping flyers down. So they kind of made that connection, I think. Oh, here come the cops.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, so then he's making his proclamation. Oh, Spider-Man's on the move here. All right. Okay.
Yeah, what are you doing, bro? Are you gonna?
How did you think I was gonna go?
The weird thing is the actual Japanese Spider-Man is much more entertaining.
Japanese Spider-Man, I will talk to.
So that was they're bringing people out of this. That was the broken window that they showed though briefly in the movie, where they barricaded themselves in there. They're bringing them out. This is after the seppuku is committed.
I almost like in the movie's representation it being like a more sparse, like sort of spread out.
Yeah, and of course you want that for a story about it, right? But somewhere in this you actually see the stretcher at the beginning. Wait, I'll find it, but you see the stretcher where they're bringing him out.
Yeah, that's wild.
Briefly.
And I will say, like, the set design work is so close to actually what this is. It's kind of incredible.
Yeah, well, it's this, but like with a lot less people, like, which is interesting because of course it's more cinematic if there's less people.
Well, Lucas and Coppola couldn't raise enough money to hire more extras.
But yeah.
What do you think, Erica? Speak your mind.
Go ahead and talk.
Well, I'm just trying to like. I'm sorry. I'm very tired today. I've been waking up way earlier than I'm used to. So, but like, I'm trying to.
I think it's up there. Yeah, we fucking know, dude. We know.
So,
you're not gonna be able to get to him.
In the film version, he goes back into the office and commits seppuku. Sorry, I can't say it.
I'm not sure I said it correctly either. So
I think it's seppuku.
Seppuku.
Yeah,
okay.
with a P.
In the general's office.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But in the clip, he looks like he's being escorted out by the police.
That's one of his people, I think. I don't think that was him.
That's not him. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's one of the survivors, the kids.
Okay.
It might have been a longer one that I saw where I saw a stretcher that they brought out. He had committed.
That was one of his Proud Boys.
I got.
Yeah, and there's a part that they referenced it. They didn't show by any way, shape, or form. What happens is you commit seppuku, which I'm glad they didn't show because I was ready to throw up.
Oh god, it is gross.
But you commit seppuku, you stab yourself.
You basically disembowel yourself.
The stomach is kind of the soul in Japanese culture, and then the reason that you hand the sword to the other person, the person chops off your head. So when they brought his body out, it was both disemboweled and there was no head to it.
Yeah,
so
you
probably
actually drag the knife across the stomach and then up, so you can really just like let those guts fall out,
Fully, oh god.
and then
And
you
then,
get
and then you're
decapitated.
sitting there and you're like, come on, dude, come on. I want it. My head needs to, and then the person,
I'm not dead enough yet.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, there's a few seconds there that are going to be incredibly painful if they don't take the head right off. Like,
Yeah, you can probably live with your guts spilled out like that for a while. If you get. The
I
right
do every day on
medical
Twitter.
Hey.
So this is the final clip
Oh.
I'm gonna show
Oh.
before we go to, the old letterbox one-liners.
Yay, letterbox one-liners.
Yes.
And I
We're
wouldn't
talking
have
about
thought,
it more and more.
I wouldn't have thought they were as
Bigly.
good as they are. I'll say that because
Yeah. This
was
was a treat. Sometimes it's
like-
more work than others. I don't talk about it, but sometimes it's definitely like I'm putting the work in on this one.
Yeah, I'm sure you're really suffering with the seppuku of letterbox seppuku.
Letterbox. Okay.
Just absolute torture.
All right, so this is the
Worst.
last clip I'm gonna play. This is about the concept of seppuku.
Duck Cabot. Bring
You're
it up.
talking about the fact that he had all these contradictions in him, that he was a functioning schizophrenic, you
Yeah.
said, and that he programmed this death, and talked about sex and death as being together.
Yeah, I mean,
almost
this notion that
intertwined
that
and romantic ideas.
the real harmony of all these contradictions can be harmonized then at the moment of death.
Yeah.
And in fact, the very form of death, which of seppuku, is in a way so delightfully metaphorically male and female, because it's both.
Mhm.
You're playing both halves of the relationship, and in the Orient, the stomach being the soul. And he really got his motor cooking on all these kinds of elaborate metaphors, and drove himself into going down a progressively narrow corridor till finally the only light at the end of the corridor was this oft rehearsed death.
As a child, he always was obsessed with pictures of knights dying in bloody armor, and the saint with the arrows in him that he posed as.
Interestingly, Western projections.
Yeah. The character you created in Taxi Driver, played by De Niro, certainly had a dark side, presumably influenced a presidential assassin. Is there a what am I trying to say?
Well, let me
Is there a
let me let you off.
Does this mean anything to you at all?
Well, first of all, I'm one of these people that believes art actually works.
Art works?
It works. That you can purge certain antisocial feelings through either watching or creating a surrogate. And so that by writing about a taxi driver or seeing one, you don't have to be one. I actually believe art has a social function in that way. For Mishima, it didn't. Every time he created a successful fantasy, a book, a play, and it was vastly popular, all it did was drove his fantasy needs up to yet a higher level, and they became more and more hyperbolic, and eventually they took over his private life. This is fascinating because here was a extremely good writer and very famous and very celebrated, but for whom art really wasn't working. It was only making his problems greater. I don't know the answer to that, but that was certainly one of the things that attracted me to this film.
This is almost a strained parallel, but one of the classic defenses of pornography is that it leads to masturbation on the part of the people who buy it, and therefore prevents them from committing sex crimes at times, and they've proved this and so forth. So this would be an example of the case where this exception, where it didn't work, it only made it worse. And
I'd hate to do that.
It's not a good parallel, but
I hate to do that parallel because pornography has now veered off into an area that is unforgivable. I mean,
what's that?
I mean, just the degree to which pornography has gone, it's the whole other discussion.
Yeah.
Is masturbation is no longer enough.
But an interesting point is in Japanese pornography, and that especially favored by Japanese high school girls, is a very beautiful young male character who dies a bloody death while still in the prime of his life.
They are very, very much enamored of violence in their.
All right, there you go.
Exactly what I thought the guy who wrote Taxi Driver would look like.
It's exactly.
I mean, those glasses are just sitting there at the chair.
Just the glasses alone. Yeah,
that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
It's like, look, if a presidential candidate's gonna die, they're gonna die. Hey.
Is that
Raging
that
Bull
interview
too.
from '85?
He also wrote Raging Bull.
Yeah, that interview is from right when the movie, directly after it came out. So I would assume.
Yeah.
So
It's probably like the press tour to promote it.
Yeah.
Well,
But
yeah, it
no,
was, right?
Yeah. So I find it really interesting though, the concept of like this as somebody, and I don't know how true. I mean, I'd assume it was, but like, you know, the more characters he kind of creates, the closer he gets to this thing where he needs to have a more violent you know, character set next time. I find that very interesting that Paul Schrader kind of made that point.
Yeah.
The art it's not cathartic to him, right? Like
it wasn't enough anymore. Exactly. And that kind of goes back to what I was trying to drive at when in the scene where he's driving by and he sees like his book, the display in the window, and he's there, and it's like it's nothing to him. Right.
Yeah.
And like it's almost as if he's like somebody else, because it's just that's not what matters to him at that point. That's not what's giving him the catharsis. That's what's giving him the artistic hit of dopamine or whatever it is that when we create and we are pleased with the results and we get what we want out of it.
And you hear it talked about a lot with pornography, where you know, someone is exposed at a young age to like violent pornography or something, and then as time goes on, they're desensitized to it. They need more and more of the violence, and they talk about it in the interview, like to come or whatever. You know what I mean? But like you never think about it with artists, where artists create art and whatever satisfaction they
I think about it all the time, and I've literally made records about it. But yeah, most of them people are not thinking.
Yeah, well, I mean, in most conversations about it.
Normal people who are to like your panel right now.
Yeah, you could just stop at normal people, Andy. It's fine.
Well, I feel like that's
it's a lot. It's a lot to chew on, and that's when I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, but I think that what I was thinking was, yes, I agree with you, but also, like, I think that's like the mental health part of it too coming in.
Yeah,
where it's like he can't like find the catharsis in the creating of this art. He feels like he has to like go farther and farther and farther with it.
Well, also, I think part of it's like the alienation of capitalism, where he's feeling like he's not being able to change anything, and he's seeing everything change around him, and he's supposed to be the most important voice, and he sees like the, you know, I guess he never read any theory or anything like that, because he decides, you know, the best thing to do is to make Japan great again and bring back Hirohito as you know, his man.
I feel like you're doing Reddit comments in Mishima right now, but yeah, I get where you're going.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that far off, because like there is
also
a
flabby.
one-to-one
recruiting would have been so easy if he had read it.
Yes,
just nagging
he would have had more than 4 guys.
Yeah,
he definitely would have had more than 4 dudes hanging out with him. Yeah.
Well, he had like a nice little mess hall going on. I mean, then he seemed to he brought the 4 that he trusted the most.
But he would have had more diehards if he had a Reddit. Let me tell you.
100%. If he had a flag too, he could have had his own.
You know,
flag.
4chan. If he was on 4chan, just imagine what he could do.
He could have really radicalized so many more people. Are we doing Letterboxd bit now? Is that what's
I'm
happening?
ready.
Let's
do it.
Yeah, let's radicalize people with Letterboxd.
Exactly. So Letterboxd is, of course, a place for film, a bottom-up democracy where everybody gets to have their say, not just the Siskel's and the Eberts and whatnot.
I wonder what they thought about this movie, by the way. I didn't check, but it was.
Ebert loved it.
Ebert thought it was awesome.
I read his thing about it.
Everyone had such a pronounced chin in this movie. I fucked with it.
Was that a verbatim quote? Everybody gets to have their say, a bottom-up democracy where people get to opine about films at, with, and to each other. Of course, the ones that tend to float to the top, or at least get the most discussion and conversation, are the ones that either are being funny, oblique, sparking a conversation. For each one of the movies that we do on here on Movie Night Extravaganza, I comb the review archives and pull the ones that strike my fancy, and then we throw them on the screen and talk about them, and that is the bit. These are the Letterboxd one-liners for Mishima. 11 4 parts. Great movie, but guys, that was a weird choice for a Friday night hangout movie.
Troy, who are
I
your
can't
friends?
imagine watching this with anybody but myself. Like I
don't think it's anybody but Troy.
It makes me feel like the time in college we decided we're going to watch 7 Samurai as the Friday night hangout movie.
Well, and
it started at midnight.
This is 4 Samurai.
Wow.
It's not lost on me that we're broadcasting Friday night, by the way. So this is a Friday night hangout movie for us right now. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, but we're a
Here for
little
it.
different. We're
We're just built different.
We're
yeah,
different.
exactly.
We're not like Troy.
Do
You know
not
what's while high?
watch while high.
I'm
Yaga
gonna
Mama.
purposefully get super high and watch it again then, just because of this one.
F you, Yaga Mama.
Yeah,
You're weak.
yeah, you're doing it wrong.
Yo, I watched this high and I was just like, we gotta make Japan great again. Guys.
Bisexual lighting.
It's
That's
perfect
disco.
also with the Golden Temple
yeah.
thing going on.
It 100% is. And this is like what, 85 that came out? Yeah.
Mhm.
A little bisexual.
Well, in the
lighting.
Kyoko's house, those shots with
Oh, that
him
was
and the
all
lady,
bisexual
like
lighting. Yeah.
it was like Blade Runner-ish.
Well, no, I mean, it
Definitely
actually is.
bisexual lighting, yeah.
Bisexual lighting was used heavily in freaking Take a Shot, Tokyo Drifter.
I thought you were gonna say Stargate.
Man,
also-
Stargate never used bisexual light, as far as I can remember.
Stargate reboot with bisexual lighting
I
only.
It
was just
also,
hoping you could
used
work
in
it in
the-
somewhere.
The Runaway Horses one. That the lighting was kind of crazy in that, but like there were times where it did seem like it was kind of doing that same lighting scheme because they were doing it as if it was on the stage.
Yeah. Yep.
Mishima needed to just chill out a little bit. That's Finnegan. That one.
Do you
That
know
one.
who
That one made me
Finnegan is?
laugh the hardest, by the way. Yeah, I mean Finnegan's are basically made out of chill. Apparently, I don't know. I don't know the person.
Maybe Mishima should have gotten super high before this movie started.
Someone just introduces him to weed, and he's like, "Man, I was tripping. I was
tripping.
I was tagging out. My bad. We don't. The emperor. He was. Fuck it. I don't
Although,
know.
has Kanye tried weed?
You do not.
No.
You do not, under any circumstances, gotta hand it to him. Chris H.
I don't know. I
Wow.
thought he was making some good points about
You
it.
gotta hand it to him.
Wow.
The first time that quote was used, I think it was around Al Qaeda. When they said, "Oh, like Al Qaeda, you do not, under any circumstances, gotta hand it." And I think it was a drill tweet, which is hilarious.
My trolls and detractors all have gross mental issues. They love drama and are jealous of my precious army man blood. Hashtag truth. Hashtag sorry, not sorry.
I am
Wow.
blown away by the fact that drill number one.
Drill's on Letterboxd and is posted maybe 10 times, and this is for like one of them. So, drill
But,
lovers in the
but
house.
no, I think the original meme, you do not under any circumstances have to hand it to him, is a drill tweet, and it's Al Qaeda.
You might be right. I don't know.
This review is from 2013.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So that's why it's funny that it's basically in like 45 voice for that. That like
Oh wait, but you set what day you
Well,
watched
it says
it, so
watch.
maybe the review
Yeah.
was later.
I mean,
But he
I don't
just
know.
watched it in 2013.
Can we get our researchers on that?
See if Drill will tweet us back about it.
We got researchers.
That would be the most astounding moment of this show, beyond John Barber berating Forrest for running his show.
John Barber berated me for having a show.
I could have fixed him.
That's a woman, isn't it?
Or
Is
Jason.
it a female person?
It could be Jason.
Dear-
Jason Buttigieg.
Dear Mr. Putin. Did you guys see that video of the woman that was like doing the thing?
I haven't watched it
If I
in
had
volume
been
on
mother-
yet. I've just read the subtitles.
Oh,
so
God.
there's a video that someone released yesterday. I don't know what celebrity it was. They claim it was a celebrity. I've never seen them before, but it was like, "Dear Mr. Putin, if I was your mother, you would have been so loved." And I feel like this is the same thing. I feel like you could do that about Mishima.
It was almost poetic too.
Yeah,
like-
Mishima
like-
definitely needed to be
It
loved
was
better.
poetic. It rhymed.
Yes.
It was 3 minutes of some lady rhyming.
Astounding and visually expressive biopic about a man who realized that ultimately he was horny for death.
It's true.
Campbell with that. Yeah, that is literally just true. That isn't funny.
Yeah.
It's just true.
Yeah. No, it was all about the penetration at the end.
By the way, I was wrong. So
Any world,
the
everybody.
The original drill tweet is, Issuing correction on a previous post of mine regarding the terror group ISIL. You do not, under any circumstances, got to hand it to him.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
We regret the error.
Alright.
More biopics should end in seppuku. How do you say it? Seppuku? Seppuku.
Sabuku.
More biopics should end in seppuku. Cullen
Yeah,
Burns.
no,
I agree.
I
I would have liked, like what's a crappy biopic, right?
would have
Think of
liked I would have liked both Sid and Nancy to end in seppuku, but I would have also enjoyed if Gary Oldman's Winston Churchill biopic had ended with Winston Churchill going, "Oh!"
Yeah, that would have made that movie much more watchable. I agree. Yeah.
Oh, Stalin is really taking over things now that World War II has ended. I guess it's time for me to commit seppuku.
Let me do some ritual suicide. You love the Golden Pavilion, then you burn the Golden Pavilion. Ben Goldenberg.
Poetic. That's a poetic one.
True fact stated.
That's kind of the point of the story, I think. But you know.
George Lucas produced this. His only note was, "Can Yoda be in this?"
For an extra few $1 million, maybe.
Yeah, maybe they get Frank Oz to voice his guts whenever he rips them out.
Dude, I feel like there's so many
Oh God.
like Mishima quotes that you could have had with Yoda, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, a Muppet remake of Mishima Life in 4 Chapters, but like with Yoda.
And Yoda is
Even in present weakened condition, the army
Yoda has some serious poetic shit.
The samurai.
Yo, Yoda got jacked.
Yo, someone's like, "Yo, Yoda, you're looking a little flabby," and he's like, "Never say that again to me. You must not."
Exactly. Google.com. Has Philip Glass ever played Coachella?
Yes.
Fran Hopner.
Yes, Fran.
I can't believe we've gone this long and not mentioned the score, which is incredible.
It is. I was
Yeah.
blown away. I was
So
not
good.
expecting that.
So that's why I threw this in here.
I think it was equally ambitious and I don't know. I had a word for it earlier that, well, I guess cinematic is the perfect word, but like equally ambitious and cinematic for the like parts of the movie that it kind of rose at, right? Like
it is hauntingly beautiful too. Like
yeah,
just the way the bow
kind of like
slides
Mishima
across the
himself.
strings.
Like he's a handsome guy. Like it kind of feels like his entire life is hauntingly beautiful. Like
It's true.
I don't know, man. Maybe I got too high before watching. All right, you ready for the last one? You really
Bring it on. Number one, Mishima.
I put it in the order you wanted, and this one is going to fucking kill me. So I wanted to take a break. You ready?
Number one, Mishima, Life in 4 Chapters, Letterboxd reviews. Let's go, Forrest. Killing yourself to own the libs.
Yes.
Oh wow.
on the nose.
Yep. That's
Just like
that's
what
pretty
Kanye
cool.
would do.
Just like
Hitting a little close to home there.
Those are the Letterboxd reviews for Mishima. Please follow Moving Extravaganza on Letterboxd, which is ostensibly Forrest. I, of course, am Conan Neutron. J. Andy World also on Letterboxd, and the wonderful Erica Strout as well. Follow all of us, please. Film reviews are great. Opinions are great. Yoda commits suicide. Okay, I shouldn't read the bottom. And I think that's it.
Don't listen to that guy.
Now I'm thinking about
Mishima.
because I am the one that pitched like the Mishima remake, but with Yoda. So clearly there would have to be an ending to it. Anyway, Letterboxd, place for film.
Pulls out the lightsaber, goes to stick it through the straw. He just disappears. His clothes fall to the ground.
Oh yeah, I guess it would be a little different, wouldn't it?
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah.
Andy,
To be fair, you wouldn't have to actually cut off the head if you wanted to do lightsaber seppuku. You could just.
it's far more efficient, really. Andy, take it away, please. With the other stuff.
Now that we're watching this live on Twitch, make sure that you subscribe. If you happen to have an Amazon Prime account, you can subscribe for free. That helps us out great. If you're watching this later on YouTube, Please, do all the YouTube things, hit that bell, hit the like, hit the subscribe.
Hit that bell like Mishima hit his stomach with that knife.
Yes.
And just like Mishima, you're gonna want to commit seppuku when you see how many videos we post.
That's right.
While you're at it, if you want to continue supporting us, we have a Patreon. If you join our Patreon, you get special things like this upcoming Wednesday. You're going to have bonus commentary for Ran after we finish our This Is Revolution episode.
Yes, for those that can't get enough of Andy World talking. Yes.
All right. Well, we're gonna go to final thoughts right now. I mean, the final thought that you'd have committing seppuku, Erica. Let's hear.
Yeah, that's real final thoughts. Better me first than me too. Go ahead.
Wow, I'm still flabbergasted by this whole thing. I don't even really know what to say about it. I really loved the visual. I feel like Paul Schrader did a fantastic job. He chose great folks to work on it, like all super impressive filmmaking. But as far as Mishima himself, I'm like still like I don't know about this guy. I'm not sure. It's fine. It's a really interesting movie. And I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about him now that I know. Now I'm reading the comments again. Don't get stuck in the comments, Erica. Don't read the comments.
It's a good life ethos, really.
Yeah, and I do it all the time. It's really dumb. No, but
Charlie
this is a fantastic.
You just give Charlie more
filmmaking.
power every time you do that. By the way, you just give him more power.
No,
he
it's
grows
your
more
comment.
powerful with every comment. Oh, was it? Okay.
I'm looking at the private chat, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Just stay with the elite. You'll be good.
Yeah. All right, I'm done with my final thoughts.
No, I walked all over it. No, have more final thoughts, Erica, please.
No, I don't feel like I have anything very poignant to say about it other than what I've already said, but just that I loved the film and the filmmaking and the craft of it all, but I had to be talked into enjoying the subject of the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's a hard movie to really pitch to.
Friday night party movie, really, is what I say.
And something that we didn't really talk about. I mean, we touched on it briefly, but like the fact that the violence in it is kind of cut from it until the end, right? Like that kind of I don't know what you guys were thinking for the ending, but it kind of like I thought 50-50 either he maybe wouldn't end up actually committing seppuku, or I was like, because I didn't research him until after I watched it. I was like, I'm gonna watch this and not want to know the ending of this because I assume the ending is gonna be like the end of his life. So I was kind of 50-50 going, well, is he gonna just say like, oh well, I lied to them, I never wanted to kill myself anyway, or was he gonna say like, at the end of it, it was going to be like a different thing. They were just going to cut to black and not show you what happened. Like, what were they going to do? And the fact that they show you all the violence at the end, almost like he is
like the last minute of the film. That's what's so crazy. It's like the last minute.
It didn't feel like a big build, though. Like, through the film, I didn't personally feel like there was a big build up to it. But, like, I was actually, one other quick thought before I forget. I was actually sort of on the fence about, I half expected him to decide not to commit seppuku at the end because of the reaction of the crowd. I was like, oh, he might be like embarrassed, and then he's gonna go and be like, this is a terrible idea. I'm just gonna go home now.
That's
if he was American, he would have. Yeah.
That's Western. That's Western thinking.
That.
Because in Japan,
I'll write on my Tumblr about this later. Yeah.
In Japan, seppuku is a moment of shame. So the fact that everyone kind of booed him, he would be fully shamed, and he would be like, no, I kind of have to go through with it. In America, we get food, and we'd be like, oh, this really didn't do much. Let me, like the Trump version of this would be like, oh, I guess I just have to go home. No one was listening to me.
Where the phrase fall on the sword kind of comes from. Like if somebody screws up, they take responsibility of it. They get, fired. They fall on the sword. Same kind of idea.
I guess it just goes to show you how little I really understand about Japanese culture.
I would have just gone home, but I guess I'm just built different.
I would have gone to the Emperor. We would have become friends. He would have seen me on TV and been like, "This guy's right." Like somebody out there gets me.
Look, so I'm the one that suggested this movie. I think it's an absolutely fascinating. I guess we can have to call it a pseudo biopic, right? It's a narrative tale. It's a controversial protagonist / main character. You know, he's an author, actor, director, political activist, but kind of like always left wanting and searching for more. It blurs the line between fact and fiction. And I think it makes for an incredible story in a movie because of that, because it interweaves stuff with his actual life along with stuff from his actual art, and does so in a way that I don't think I've ever seen before. I think it's absolutely remarkable. And the harmony within it is extraordinary, considering it's such a bizarre, winding tale to a certain degree. I mean, again, to be clear, he was one of Japan's most famous authors. Like, he was basically
was Japan's most famous author. He was.
Yeah, I mean, but almost made it through. Like, think of like if Hemingway was like, founded the Proud Boys or something, right? It'd be like that level of notoriety.
Didn't he? I'm just kidding.
But yeah, like, I mean, the point of fact is that ultimately wanted was like a return to like imperialistic traditionalism, right? Which is sort of like, what? Which is kind of crazy, because it's like you look at him, he's such a smart dude in so many ways, and it's just like that's the thing that's like, oh, he thought that was going to be the thing, huh? But yeah, Paul Schrader directing, incredible 3 times. Philip Glass soundtrack, the set design, just extraordinary, just a beautiful film, and I'm really glad we discussed it, because I mean, I feel like we could go just like the movie. I feel like we could go another like 3 parts after this, and not even like scratch the surface, and that's what I love about it. And this is why I do the Criterion challenges, so I see stuff that I wouldn't necessarily initially think of, and I thought it was going to be a completely different kind of movie, and I absolutely adore it in all its totality.
I mean, it's a moment of incredible elasticity for a culture that hadn't really changed in centuries, right? Like, it's this moment where people do feel like something is incredibly wrong, which, I mean, if you're, grinded into gear on full gear or whatever on capitalist realism, you know what I mean? Like, that this is kind of the only way forward. This is the only way to redeem your culture after centuries of, at least Western countries saying, no, you got it wrong. You've been feudal. You've fucked this all up. Of course, there's going to be competing philosophies on how you should move forward. And the most, I think the most popular that wasn't this version of capitalism competing philosophy is obviously Marxism, but there's a lot of differentiated ideas about what that would entail. Like, is this, do you have to kind of create this capitalist society and then transition, as Marx said, to communism after that? Or is there some way to change this now and really make this into a socialist society? A lot of young people felt like there was something that had to change. But whenever there's something that has to change, there's always going to be a reactionary force. And his reactionary force was, no, we just have to go back to the way it was 30 years ago when there was an emperor that made all the decisions for us, and we're back into this feudal society. And obviously his vision of that is the 1600s. You know what I mean? Like, but it is the same hierarchy that would have ruled before the war. So he's kind of making this case slowly throughout his work. As the society kind of gets kicked up into this, high gear, and he's not giving everybody his vision of it all at once. And at the same time, he's their only internationally renowned writer.
Yeah.
So like, I think that plays a lot of role into it, right? There's not 2 voices of Japanese society going, well, I like these parts of it, but I don't like these parts. And another person saying, well, I like none of it. Let's transition back to being a fucking samurai society. There's just one guy on an international stage, and then every time they ask the guy, is there any political implication to this? He's like, oh, no, there's not. There's no political implication. Meanwhile, in Japan, where no one is actually looking to him for that information, he's like, no, we need to be samurai again.
Yeah. I mean, it, like, like the Letterboxd review said, right? Like, more biopic should end with seppuku. It's not something you normally see, especially in a shameless society and world that we live in now, where it's that's part of the act of being famous is just doing something incredibly like shameful, and it gets you the clicks and the hate clicks and so on and so on. But
yeah, and we kind of have people that transition to a national stage, even if they are batshit crazy, and it doesn't reflect on our entire culture to the rest of the world, right? Like you can have an American celebrity go to another country, have a fucking schizophrenic episode, and then you'll be like, oh well, that's that person, and the rest.
Yeah,
of
that's just Dennis Rodman.
Yeah,
not a big deal.
Like. So yeah, no, like literally that. Like you have people go there, and then but if you only had that celebrity on a world stage, only had that celebrity representing your culture as you're kind of in this moment of full transition, you can see how society itself would kind of close ranks around this person and be like, this is our guy. This is the only guy that we have doing this, so this is our guy. And he goes on TV like it's Dennis Rodman, but he speaks like fluent French and like is incredibly lucid and like not like his brain is not infected by syphilis at all in your mind. You know what I mean? Because you're sitting there and you're like, oh, this is Dennis Rodman. Like this is the guy we need to have our whole thing be around. Look at this. There's like a Western journalist, French journalist, American journalist, all of them really like just being like, wow, this is such a smart, lucid individual. And you're like, well, I think we have to protect this guy. Like your generals as he comes in and takes control of a fucking barrack are like, no, wait, don't kill yourself. We still need you to.
Yeah, exactly. I can fix him.
Yeah. And you would assume that if there's a chance that, maybe not based on the actual clip of it that we watched, but based on the movie, like there might be a chance that like he would have just kind of been forgiven. And they would have put him in psychiatric care for a little bit, not told anyone about it. He'd be back and medicated and whatever else. But Andy?
Yeah, I really think, kind of thinking about this film for a bit, because I really didn't watch it until like a couple hours before we came on. But
cramming for the test.
Yeah, I know. It's
student Andy World.
It's not an interesting story. But anyways, the
which one? No.
Stargate. No.
All right.
There it is.
I was going to mention.
Everybody, take a drink.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I was going to throw it in there just for Erica. But anyways, yeah, I was really wanted to mention you're mentioning that this is an odd film, but it really is very much like the films of Seijun Suzuki, who did Branded to Kill and Tokyo.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah. Which if you've not seen his movies, he does, he does more movies, but they're very abstract and weird and I can't even explain Branded to Kill.
It's good thing you're talking. That's good.
It's about assassins, but it's
All
also basically the whole movie is just loads of violence surrounded by sex and rice sniffing.
Rice sniffing, just like the parties I used to go to.
Yeah. No, it's just he's just cook some rice and bring it to me, and it's just sitting there in the kitchen going, yes.
Just like the parties I used to go to.
Yeah, the movie's insane, but it's great. It's beautiful. It's got weird butterflies animated in it.
Hey Andy, how do you feel about this movie?
I was gonna say, any thoughts on this movie or just a completely unrelated movie?
I'm setting up I
can't wait for the payoff.
Structure of the Suzuki films, actually does have a lot of what it borrowed from, which is why I was expecting it to be a Quentin Tarantino-esque take on Japanese films. However,
there was some beat in it.
The question I had asked whenever at the beginning of the episode, why did a white guy kind of do this? Which I don't think I actually asked that exactly, but I kind of hinted at it, I believe. But why as an outsider voice, being able to draw from deep cuts of Japanese cinema and to tell the story that I don't think any of the directors in Japan at the time of this movie coming out could have done.
Well, they also were just completely embarrassed by this being a story.
It was too controversial, right? He was.
No, exactly. That's why it had to be an outsider.
Maybe they were too close to it or something. Yeah.
And there's the thought of him being an outsider in terms of culturally, but there's also Paul Schrader as the crazy person director, right? Like that did create someone like Travis Bickle. Like, you know, he does make films about crazy fascists. I mean, nationalism is not the only thing that really defines characters, right? Like there's all these different things. And you can say, I mean, there's a lot of people that had the take that like this is Paul Schrader's ultimate. This is the ultimate Paul Schrader character. Like this is somebody that really had the machismo to it, had like the kind of fascist element to it that, you know, kind of Travis Bickle had, like the, you know, not that Paul Schrader had those politics, but like that is the kind of character that he does like to explore the psyche of.
Well, also he was just the guy who was the most persistent about it, right? That like
he wanted to tell the story.
He had to keep working at it to get the story because he had to get the rights. And I think they also like thinking about Schrader being interested in like how a person's life choices, their compulsions, like lead to unintended consequences.
Totally. And just if I can answer to the point of Taxi Driver, I think the pseudo-fascism of it, I think is just sort of like a character sidecar, side baggage to it. Like I think Paul Schrader is just fascinated in a certain type of individualist, of which Mishima is absolutely like a paragon of. And not saying he's like advocating for or against, but like for whatever reason, that dude is very able to get in the head of that style of person, write a very compelling film for it.
He's
also, I mean, even in like Cat People or whatever that he had so even in that he had a Mishima book on the night in that. So it's like he was kind of enamored by this, or you know, at least fascinated by this author long before this movie ever was released.
Who is, let's be clear, pretty fascinating. Like that's what makes it an interesting movie.
No, 100%.
Whether you're bought into his whole thing,
kind of often are. Like there often are elements to like, why does someone get that as an ideology? Like there are insane, fascinating elements to it. And this person more than anything, because this is a culture that was ramped up. Like this is a culture that had been like this. Like I don't think Mishima necessarily could have existed in previous or current Japanese culture. Like this is someone who was 100% of the time that he's representing. But listen, my final thought is somewhere there must be a higher principle that reconciles art and action.